Okay, you're on.
Okay. Call the workshop to order, and we will please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for spending the evening with us. I have a brief statement I want to read to tee up what we're going to do tonight. Tonight's workshop is dedicated to the effort of creating an ordinance to regulate a data center within East Manchester Township. It will be a collaborative effort with the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission. And the supervisors and staff would like to thank the Commission for their help in this process. We will have citizen comment period, which will consist of 30 minutes in length. And everyone will be limited to 1 3-minute speaking opportunity, with township residents offered to speak first. We have a large task in front of us. We've got a lot of work to do this evening. And I will be very selective, if at all, in responding to questions or comments from the audience while we deliberate. We all need to remember, like all ordinances, this is a living document that can be changed over time, and it will change, guaranteed. Allow me to go over a brief timeline on how we got to tonight's meeting. The township started this process in the spring of 2025 to be proactive to the growth of data centers in PA. We have endeavored to answer citizens' questions on township's website and continue to provide updates as needed. On October 21st, 2025, the supervisors approved a curative amendment designed to prevent someone from submitting a special exception to the township's zoning hearing board, which in my opinion would have most likely passed because it would have to pass under our old current regulations that we have now. On January 5th, we narrowed our focus to the location of the data center overlay by selecting the York Baker property, which brings us to tonight's meeting, which we will focus on the data center ordinances to meet the curative amendment deadline of April 19th, 2026. Points to remember, which are very important. Regulation is required. Saying no is not allowed. The township has a legal obligation to regulate data centers rather than prohibit them. Ordinances cannot be drafted so restrictively that they make a use impossible to develop, as this exposes the township to legal challenge and liability. Courts consistently strike down ordinances that effectively ban use, impose excessive or unrelated conditions, and ordinances that are not supported by solid planning and land use rationale. Public comment is highly valued, and I feel that we have demonstrated the willingness to accept citizen input and to be as transparent with our deliberation as possible. However, the sheer volume of requests for answers to various questions, submitted ordinance changes, and those changes require us to review and consider for incorporation has become very, very challenging. Answering every question, addressing every concern, and continuously rewriting the ordinance draft is becoming nearly impossible. A sound data center ordinance is very important to the township. However, it cannot be allowed to consume 100% of the staff's time. The township is entitled to set reasonable procedural limits to ensure it can continue its day-to-day operations. The township makes every effort to accept public comments at advertised public meetings and hearings, accept written comments submitted by stated deadlines, compile and summarize reoccurring themes for Planning Commission and Board review, rely on professional consultants such as our solicitors, planners, and engineering for ordinance drafting. And in closing, the township understands and acknowledges the strong public interest regarding the regulation of data centers. The Board of Supervisors, the Planning Commission members, and township staff are taking these concerns and suggestions into consideration and are committed to protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the community. The township again wants to thank you, the residents, for their engagement and encourages continued participation through formal processes as the ordinance moves towards completion. So is there a motion to approve or amend the agenda as presented for tonight's meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So with that, I am going to hand it over to our solicitor.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I missed 2.1. Again. Oh, sorry. I misread something. My apologies.
That's okay. Hand it over to the solicitor.
Good evening. I'll go in order here and hit the two topics before I get into the status of my ordinance workshop. So first, Joan and Jeffrey Flitzer have requested that the Board of Supervisors consider designating their parcel, 566 Gravel Hill Road, Mount Wolf, PA 17347, as property within the new data center overlay, or otherwise consider permitting data centers on that property. Additionally, Cheryl and Randall Lowe request that the Board of Supervisors consider designating their parcel, 124th Street, Mount Wolf, PA 17347, as property within the new data center overlay, or otherwise consider permitting data centers on that property. So the purpose of the workshop tonight is for the board and for the planning commission to review the ordinance, to go through it item by item, and to talk about things that they'd like to see changed, or to sort of more broadly discuss the things they like or don't like. At the end of that, there will be public comment, as the chairman has stated. And then then we will take the comments and make the changes that the board and planning commission would like to see to the ordinance. The ordinance will then come back. The board will have opportunity to weigh in again at public hearing. The planning commission will have a chance to weigh in on it again. And the York County Planning Commission will also weigh in on the ordinance again. So those are the steps that are between now and any potential ordinance. Today is just, as the chairman said, a workshop to work through the provisions of the ordinance that have been posted online. This is a new draft in the ordinance that was considered at the hearing in, I think it was October. So I will begin with working through the ordinance. The first,
Hold on a minute, please. Do the Bitzers or the Lowe's wish to make any statements at this time?
Yes.
Okay. Who would like to go first?
We'll go first.
Okay.
If you
Um,
may.
Go to the podium and use the microphone if you would. State your name and address, please.
I would just say you're still echoing us. Amazing.
I do know that when there's more bodies in the room, it definitely changes things with the AV system.
They tried turning this down. He's trying.
Can you hear me okay? This need to be on. Thank you. I'm Jeffrey Bitzer. This is my wife Jen. As you referenced, we made a request to the board for some consideration. That consideration is and request is primarily contained in our January 14 letter to the township. We would ask that that be made part of whatever record it is that we're creating. I think we set forth our position with greater specificity here, and really we use tonight as an opportunity to comment in a general way on what we're discussing. I want to thank the township for the time and serious consideration that you've given to this issue. It is clearly a difficult issue, raising basic questions about the nature of the township. And I don't think any of us envy you in your position and the decisions that are in front of you. Is there a copy of the zoning map? we can
Oh,
look at?
yes. Yep.
Is that one with the overlay?
With the, no, this is not with the overlay. But here, it's this parcel here, this parcel here. And then I think in his original proposal, it was also this portion here. And I don't think it came down back here at all. It did, it did? It does? Right here. Because this is the Lowe's, right here, and this is the Bitzers. Right here, Bitzers. Yep.
So the overlay
Look for
district,
one.
as it appears on that map, and as I understand it, is the orange and the green.
So right now, okay, so this is the current zoning map. The green is agricultural zoning district, and the orange is the R2 zoning district. Correct, Kate? Okay. And I'm not the zoning officer anymore. So anyways, huh? No, he thought there was going to be so there was an overlay map that the York Baker's farm.
Well, he's gonna give his presentation. What you're doing right now is wasting time. Okay.
With all due respect, no disrespectful outbursts here, okay? We're all here just trying to accomplish this meeting.
Okay, Karen, moving on.
Go ahead, Mr. Bitzer.
The zoning map that you had at the last meeting, and the zoning map I was prepared to comment on, had the overlay contained on it. And I understood in part the discussion tonight was to address the depth, the dimensions of the overlay, and where the overlay appears and where it doesn't appear. I was hoping to be able to reference portions of that map, but it's not. I'm sorry if the lady thinks I'm wasting time, but I'm trying to actually save time by being able to be more precise in our discussions. Nevertheless, if we get to that point and we get to the overlay map, as you will, I'm sure, in your deliberations.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
What you'll see is our parcel, our property, our home, is on the overlay map, a small brown portion which appears in the middle of the blue overlay area that's been proposed to the board. Essentially, we are surrounded by the overlay area, but excluded from the overlay area as it appeared on the previous map. It appears certainly like a hole in the donut as the overlay area wraps to our south, to our west, to our north, and we, as I say, are in the center of that. It's because of that we're here, and I wanted to be perfectly clear that we generally oppose the arrival of the data center. However, given the course the board has selected, to limit the impact by ordinance rather than completely prohibiting the center, as some municipalities have done, we support the ordinance and respectfully request that our property be included in the overlay. The possibility was first raised when we were last here in the meeting on January 5 with the board of supervisors, and was later submitted in our formal request letter, which I referenced, dated January 14th. I would like to say too, just to be clear, we have not been approached by anybody to develop our portion. We have no development plans, but what we're trying to address is consistency in the overlay and the planning that you are considering. We make this request because of the unique relationship we have between the two properties. We have 41.16 acres, and that's in the middle of the overlay as proposed for York Baker's farm. The same two high voltage power lines that have been referenced for that farm run through our property. The same large diameter gas line runs through our property, and there's a common access lane off of Gravel Hill Road. The shared lane, which we could point out if you wish, leads to both the Baker parcels, our parcel, and continues on to the large quarry, which is included in the overlay. That lane is the only access to our property and the only off-road access to the Baker property. We're not asking that we be included to expand development rights. It's rather about what we consider to be protection, fairness, and a sound land use plan in light of the fact that our property is directly adjacent to and nearly surrounded by the overlay. In fact, if included in the overlay, our property could provide additional buffers to the village of Saginaw, which I'm sure would be advantageous to many people. My wife has one.
I'm Joan Bitzer, and we found out about this proposal plan, New Year's Eve. We got a call from our neighbors, Cheryl and Randy Lowe, and we had not known anything about it until then. So of course, we tried to educate ourselves in a way that made us, try to think of what was the best course of action for us. What we found is that there are benefits to us to be included in the overlay, because if we don't, there's a loss of compatibility with the surrounding area, reduced property value. We're in our 70s and ready to downsize, and now this. Exposure to impacts from large-scale development without access to the overlay's mitigation standards. Our well, our 215-year-old house, our peaceful enjoyment of our surrounding farmland, I saw 70 deer on my way home tonight, are all going to be impacted. So being included in the overlay offers us protection. It can benefit the township by having clean, defensible zoning boundaries, and it reduces the risk of future zoning challenges. It also allows the township to plan infrastructure holistically, stormwater, traffic, utilities, and emergency access, rather than managing fragmented rules within the same development area. And most importantly, inclusion now avoids future variance requests, rezoning petitions, or hardship claims that would otherwise come back before this board. It leaves the township vulnerable if we're not included. For nearby residents, inclusion means consistency. Overlay standards are intended to protect neighbors through uniform buffering, lighting, controls, noise limits, and environmental safeguards. Leaving one parcel outside the overlay creates a gap in the system. In fact, the inclusion of our parcel, as Jeff said, could provide additional buffering area. Including our property ensures the entire area functions as a coordinated district with predictable outcomes rather than piecemeal regulation. In summary, including our parcel in the overlay district protects our property from isolation and disproportionate impacts, strengthens the township's planning framework, improves infrastructure coordination, promotes fairness and public confidence. We respectfully ask the township to include our parcel in the overlay concurrently with the surrounding North Acres Farm parcels. Thank you for your time, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
Mike.
The property, your property, you say is 40 acres, is your site accessible, the entire thing without going through tributaries, a stream? Like, I mean, is there topography? Well, I'm thinking, if it went down and back up, is there a stream separate, anything bisect your site? That one?
There's a stream that runs through the valley, and frankly, I think the lower part of the
Right
valley
here.
is probably floodplain. But it's a very small stream. Back 200 years ago, it was known as Wogan's Run, and it often doesn't run at all if there's not been a lot of rain. But that doesn't really work as a demarcation line for the property.
I'm just considering, I mean, if there is a chance of extending the boundary that we're talking about and looking at, that we have to do the entire property.
Our entire property?
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
just saying, because, I mean, on the Saginaw side, the R2 district could still come into play.
And
I'm just getting this out in discussion, that you're looking at the entire property.
And that's what we're proposing. If you look at the maps, you fine tune the maps, when our property was subdivided out of the Baker Farm, in order to have the subdivision, there needed to be road frontage. So there's a tiny panhandle about 150 feet wide that runs from our property up to basically the picnic pool. That's where we got our road frontage, and that's the only road frontage we have. The township at some point decided to turn that into a drainage swale, which they did, making it absolutely unusable as an access point. So all of our access has been through the lane that exists. Does that answer your question?
I
Yeah,
don't
and the
understand.
other property comes up and around, so the only parcel of ours that goes up to that other road is that 150 feet wide. Panhandle.
And you have access from the Saginaw side, I'm not sure the road. I mean,
No, we do not,
You don't have any access
No.
over to that side.
because the sewage treatment plant blocks that.
Yeah, the sewage treatment plant is right here, where my mouse, I know it's hard to see, but it's right here.
Could you just go around their parcel?
Their parcel is right here, this odd shape,
You know, it's all that white line down into Saginaw.
this right
Yeah,
here.
who owns that down into that road there?
Who lives there? This isn't a interactive map, this is a scanned map. Does anyone know from Saginaw who lives right here?
Is that the Eagles?
They're actually our neighbors. I'm trying to think of his last name.
Okay, okay,
Okay, any other questions?
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lowe's?
Boy, Jeff's a little hard to follow up. I'm not as technical as Jeff is. My name's Cheryl Lowe. I'm here representing myself and my husband Randy. We own the property at 124th Street in Mount Wolf, actually coming right off of Saginaw. Thank you to all you sitting before us. You're doing a difficult job. This is a situation that no matter how you act, people are going to be impacted. Our property directly adjoins or is immediately affected by the Vistor property at 566 Gravel Hill Road and the Baker Farm parcels, which are proposed for inclusion in the AI or Data Center Overlay District. We appreciate the opportunity to speak as landowners who will be directly impacted, regardless of whether our parcel is included or excluded from the overlay. Randy's grandfather maintained the horses that carried the stone out of the quarry and did it from the area where our home is located. He was first offered all the surrounding land that is now Baker Farm. He declined the farm due to the quarries and the liability they held. He further acquired most of the property adjoining ours from the stop sign at the playground. The first house on the left was Randy's dad's sister, Aunt Evelyn. Then his sister, Aunt Odessa, was the next house. Then Grandpa Joe's home, and there were no other homes to the intersection of 4th Street. Upon the death of Grandpa Joe, the land was divided among Randy's dad and siblings. Subsequently, the land along York Street was sold and several homes built. The land where we live was designated to Randy's dad and subsequently Randy and I. We had hopes to pass it to our daughter, Samantha Joe, named after her great-great-grandfather Samuel and her great-grandfather Joe, making 4 generations of Lowe to enjoy the land bestowed to us by Grandpa Joe. The public pool started in 1952 and ran until 1981. My husband literally grew up on this land, hand in hand with Grandpa Joe, so there's a lot of motion going through our household. This leads me to say we support and request inclusion of our property in the AI overlay district because we believe it is in the best long-term interest. However, our support is not unconditional. Inclusion comes with significant burdens, and exclusion would leave us exposed to impacts without any regulatory protection. Speaking tonight is intended to ensure the board fully understands that reality. Inclusion is burden without guaranteed benefit. If our property is included in the overlay, 1, it cannot independently support a data center use under the ordinance. 2, it is not required for access to the Baker site and derives no separate development entitlement from overlay inclusion. 3, our parcel remains subject to adjacency impacts from the industrial use regardless of our overlay status. We've received no automatic financial benefit and have not been offered any.
5, it does not advance the district planning objective as our underlying zone is R2 and is adjacent to the village. We do not have sufficient hard road frontage for development. 6, the topography of our land is such that, other than the 2 homes at the entrance to our lane, no other home can see our property from their residence. Those 2 homes at our entrance from 4th Street can only see our home, parts of the property during the winter months when there are no leaves on the trees. We do not have the ability to develop, so our zone leaves us no financial objective. We will still bear the environmental and quality of life risks. Our property could act as an additional buffer to a data center. Inclusion represents a burden without guaranteed benefit. At the same time, excluding our property would be worse, and the same issues would be prevalent both ways. If data centers are permitted on the proposed parcels and our parcel is excluded, 1, we could still experience the same environmental impacts. We could still face noise and vibration impacts. We could still risk groundwater drawdown and contamination. Many of you know that our property was once the Meadowbrook Swim Club. The pool closed in 1981. Water was pumped from the quarry to the pool. The last 2 years of operation, the water quality deteriorated in the quarry due to algae blooms. This algae in the water that flowed into the pool made it impossible to clearly see to the bottom at the deep end of the pool, making it unsafe due to visibility. The algae blooms were believed to be due to increased chemical and manure seepage into the groundwater from the farming around the quarry. After the closure of the pool, Randy converted the concrete block bathhouse into his home. The well water was absolutely nasty, to say the least. It smelled so strong of sulfur, you wondered if the sulfur odor soaked into your skin after taking a shower. The bathroom surely smelled that way after the shower. Water from the faucet was difficult at best for even me to muster down. We battled this for years until there was no longer agricultural farming. No plowing of the land or fertilizer or manure spread. Took years, but now we had absolutely some of the best water you could drink. What does that mean to you? It means we know that the geology of the land causes impact to our water. Merely stating that we would see to it that you get potable water doesn't give me any protection that I wouldn't be left days or weeks without running water. Who is going to pay to get York water from 4th Street to my house and business? Moreover, who's going to pay that bill every month? We have no standing protections. That is why I believe exclusion would be a burden without protection, and why inclusion is the lesser of 2 harms. One of the most serious concerns involves groundwater. Our home relies on a private well water. The area's limestone geology, which is known for fractures, rapid groundwater movement, high vulnerability to contamination. There is an existing quarry of approximately 10 acres with a depth of roughly 90 feet and approximately 50 feet of standing water. The water depth remains constant from springs emptying into the quarry, while water seeps out through fissures at the same rate. Is this part of the aquifer that feeds our well? What happens when significant amounts of water is pumped out? Do I lose water then? One of the many unknown factors. The former swimming pool, I refer to as our cement pond, has water flow directly from the stream that comes out of the ground through a spring in the Bitzer pasture and travels through a culvert pipe into our property. Some of the water is diverted into the cement pond, out the overflow at the end of the pond, and directly back into the stream, which then flows into a sinkhole directly adjacent to our property in the steep stream bed. What happens if uses in the surrounding area cause the stream not to flow, or it becomes contaminated from runoff groundwater? Our pond could become dry and empty, leaving us a huge 125-foot by 65-foot concrete hole in our front yard. 230,000 gallons of water gone. Who's going to pay to fill the hole? What do I do with 230,000 gallons of contaminated water in my front yard? What happens if my pond can no longer reasonably be kept from algae growing and mosquitoes and other pests become rampant? How do we get to enjoy an afternoon on our deck, overhanging the pond, or worse, our house only feet from the pond? We know large data centers require significant water use, directly or indirectly, substantial stormwater management systems, and heavy construction activity. Our fear is threefold. 1, our well could be drawn down and depleted. Groundwater contamination could occur with little ability to remediate once limestone aquifers are compromised. Our home is earthwork on 3 sides.
Mrs. Lowe, may I interrupt a minute?
I'm just about finished.
Okay, but I just want to say that this has no bearing on us accepting the land in an overlay. This has testimony to do with data center ordinances, which we will dive into with the wells and the water. So,
I
so if you could
understand.
close, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. It still has to do with, the reason that we want to be in the overlay is because you can't offer us the protection that is needed. So coupling with everything else, the vibration from heavy construction and going-on operations, constant mechanical noise from cooling systems, etc., truck traffic backup noise, beeping all the time. These impacts affect not just property value, but daily livability and life and health. We understand that the Bitzer property owners are also seeking inclusion in the A1 overlay. That reinforces our concern about cumulative impacts. When multiple adjacent parcels are developed for similar high-intensity uses, the impacts multiply for us. If you look at the map, you can plainly see that we are literally surrounded. Directly behind us is the sewage treatment plant, which is an industrial use 200 feet from my home. Chrissy's pointing out there where our
Sewer.
property is located.
And this is the Lowe's, yep.
It was also stated earlier that the property on the other side of us has also been included in the AI zone, which is part of the, so we are like literally in that donut hole. Is the overlay in the current state spot zoning? Google defines spot zoning when a local government rezones a single parcel or small area differently from the surrounding land, often creating an island, which can be controversial and potentially illegal. It benefits one owner. Putting us in, Bitzers in the overlay could potentially benefit 3 owners. I could also say that adding would help supplement and not supplant the overlay, offering a more pristine buffer between the data centers and the village of Saginaw. We have 11 acres that literally protects the village of Saginaw from any development coming forward. And we lose any benefit of the R2 zone because we cannot develop that. So we're just stuck there in the middle of this hole. So the last issue, I just learned that, we asked the board to recognize that the adjacent landowners like us are not asking for special treatment. We're asking for fair treatment and reasonable protection in the face of a land use that carries unique and permanent risk. One last issue I would like to address. I just learned that my name is attached to a document submitted by somebody other than me that all of you may have. The only documents I submitted to the board was my request to speak this evening and my issues on some ordinance things. So what I would like to do tonight is also make it known that I did not endorse my name on any other materials that you have. It was asked of me to do so. I had not read any of that information. So if you could please, for the record, strike my name off any of that correspondence, I would greatly appreciate it. So again, we respectfully request your consideration to include our parcel in the overlay, and we thank you for the opportunity to be heard this evening.
Any questions for the Lowe's? Okay, seeing none, thank you, both of you, for doing that. Okay, so that takes us down to to who?
No, I was trying to get you to turn your mic on.
Okay, that takes us, I'm going to hand it back over to our attorney. We're going to start our overview discussion for the data center workshop. Now, our plan is we're going to go down the list. Some of the things we've already debated and rode hard, so we're going to rush through them. There's certain items that we will have to deliberate on, such as water usage and that sort of thing. So anybody have any comments when we go down through, please speak up. Okay.
Section 1 of the ordinance applies the overlay to the 2 parcels discussed earlier, the Baker Farm parcels and the old quarry. Absent hearing anything, I'll move through. Article 2 establishes the same, or Section 2 establishes the same thing, placing it in the code. Section 3 create a new subsection for data centers, which is a use that will have to be, to apply for a special exception, you'll have to meet all the requirements for this use. So A, data centers shall be permitted as a special exception to the data center overlay district in compliance with the standards contained therein. Only one principal data center building shall be allowed per parcel, and data center building is a defined term later on in the ordinance.
Okay, throughout the night, I'm gonna play devil's advocate. I'm gonna bring up some issues that, maybe will get everybody talking. That, I understand, one parcel per lot, is it saying?
One principal.
One
Parcel,
principal?
yes.
Per parcel. So that means, this 300 and some acres can only have one building?
It would mean that it could only have one data center, which is this, here we define it as a facility used primarily for, or intended to be used primarily for the housing, operation, and or co-location of computer and communications equipment and for handling, storing, and backing up the data necessary for the operation of a business or organizational entity. Data center may also include data center equipment or DCE and or data center accessory uses when located on the same tract or similar to adjacent parcels.
Would the, so one building per parcel, 300 acres, but a developer can come in and ask to break that into 5, 10 different parcels, given
They could request to subdivide the property. But that would come before the board like any subdivision.
Right. So you have to go through your pieces, and I guess the question here in this particular section B. Right, so,
Turn the microphone towards you.
Got
Yeah,
it?
straight on, yeah.
So in that section, it says, maybe increased up to 300,000 gross square feet. They can't build 350,000, or 1 million square feet, right?
That's correct, and to get to that maximum size, they would have to show, that it would allow for an increase or a decrease in the number of buildings. So for example, you would be building one larger building, even to get to 300,000 square feet, and you'd have to show that it's not gonna have the negative impact, negative impacts in increasing that footprint.
Thank you.
So I have a question too. So under that, if I understand with the overlay, if they meet the requirements for the current zoning for the agricultural, we would not be able to disallow them to subdivide, is that correct?
For subdivision purposes, yeah, they would still be, it's an agricultural still would be the base district. So I think if that's the question, yes, they would still be able to subdivide based off of the base district.
And once they subdivide it, as long as they meet the other requirements, we could not stop them from putting that as well.
They would have to, yes, they would have to meet the requirements, and then they could apply to build another data center.
So is that something that we can tighten up so that this particular lot could not be subdivided, or that we could only allow one data center if it happens?
You could not tell them that they couldn't subdivide their property, and saying that you would only allow one data center in the whole township would also be really wary. Now, you have to provide for one data center, so this is sort of where we get into the fair share doctrine, so I think there's some confusion over, can we only allow one? You can't explicitly just say, we only have one and then we're done. Practically, that can be the outcome, potentially, but you can't say that explicitly.
So I think this would go hand in hand with the buffer requirements that we put on. So it's the next line down there is 300 foot. My next question to everybody here is 300 foot adequate, or do we need more? So we got to couple that with the subdivision and all that stuff.
But that section that you're pointing to, right, section B, starts out with parking and truck driving. I mean, I think in general, I would like to see larger buffers, but I do recall, I thought, Miller said at one of the meetings, that once you get north of something like 1,000 foot stuff in my head, that puts us at risk for being overturned and pushed back.
I did speak with Attorney Miller about the setbacks, and his suggestion was that setbacks are good up to 500 feet. It's problematic over 500 feet, up to 1,200. it's
In ter-
challengeable.
In terms of being defensible.
Yes, in terms of being defensible.
And so I'd just like to point out that where we're headed here is if developer comes in, we say 600 feet based on previous court cases, precedents being set. We'll wind up getting that ordinance thrown out, and then we're at risk. We go back to something else that is less restrictive.
If our solicitor says that we are, if this is really overly restrictive and we're open for challenge, then we'd have to reconsider that.
I think we should go to the maximum that the lawyer thinks, because dealing with the truck traffic and the noise myself, 300 feet's not enough.
And I agree with that. I'd like to
Turn
push
on
it
your
to the
mic.
max, but I don't want to go into a situation where, based on previous things, or precedents being set,
Right.
that we put ourselves at risk. I want to stand on firm ground so that it can't be overturned.
You know, I agree, 1,000 feet's not even enough, but, what we can legally fight, I would take it to the max of that. Because I can hear noise now. I know Mike hears it. I hear new noise in the wintertime now. And I know where it's coming from, but if they're reefers or whatever, it's idling all night long now.
I think all of us agree that our intent tonight is to create an ordinance that is less impactful to our township,
Right.
but it has to be defendable.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
What we can defend, I would like to see it set at the max. Because once it's there, you're never gonna move it, and I feel for the residents of the township, because the warehouses have rolled in, and I think we were behind on this, and now we deal with it, it's too late. So anything we can do here to push it back to the max.
Yeah, well, let's just address that for a moment. I agree, we're too late, but through that process over the past two decades, we've learned and we've changed, and the new folks showing up, developing out the last bit of that industrial land for warehouses are under new, more definitive restrictions, such as the noise ordinance. So this gets back to a comment Chairman made earlier, where we learn over time and we push forward. But we've gotta, I agree, we should set it to the max so that it's defendable and can't be overturned if someone causes a problem that we don't want.
So then, is everyone up here okay with that? If we're gonna have the mindset tonight that we're gonna set everything to the maximum that we can, as long as he can sleep at night?
Well, and the antithesis of that, and I had emailed you, you responded to me earlier in the week. You want to do as small as you can and still make it well within presence. Like I had asked where the 300,000 square feet came from, and I knew if you did 300,000 in lieu of 150, I understand the trade-off that implies,
Yeah.
or that it's expected to be there. But where did the 300,000 or even the 150 go with that first? Is that something we've seen in other townships, or is that something that precedence has been set? Like, I'm sure you need to make it big enough so that it doesn't have a legal challenge. Is that same principle apply here? You're picking 150 because anything smaller is not going to do it.
That's part of it. You know, you can't say, 10,000 square feet, because you can't actually put a data center in that. Additionally, we reviewed, the York County Planning Commission came out with came out while we were doing the ordinance with a model ordinance. Lancaster has since come out with model ordinances. Other counties, planning commissions and planning departments have come out with other ordinances. So that's where some of the numbers and things like that, like 150 or 300,000 square feet, or the scale, the buffer scale, things like that have come from those professional organizations.
But I like the twofold attack, making the buffer as wide or as far as we can, as big as we can, and make it defensible, and have the building as small as we can and still defend it.
I agree, and I think you have your marching orders there. Anytime we're talking buffers, you know what we want to see, so we don't have to belabor down through every buffer. So.
With E then, the building siting, that's fairly standard, talking about the way the building should be sited on the property, minimizing visual impacts, providing vehicular access, accommodate adequate parking. I won't go line item by line item, but does anyone have any thoughts on that topic? F, the maximum building height. So this would be one thing to consider if the parcels were to change. Right now, the overlay is only in the agricultural district, so the maximum height would be that allowed in the agricultural district. If it was to go over multiple districts, multiple base districts, so residential 2 or what have you, that would have to probably be updated in this ordinance to set a max height, because right now, then it would become inconsistent.
Chief Stevens, do you have any comment on max height?
I am not in favor of anything that exceeds the current limitations of the township. We rely on aerial apparatus from mutual aid companies in this area, so we can't continue to build on the good intents of our neighbors to support us all the time.
Okay.
In the original proposal that we reviewed last year, when there was a chart before it was an overlay, it was set at 55 feet, which I think in the industrial district, it's 75, I believe. So that's even shorter than that.
So, and right now, as the overlay was applied, it would be 55 feet, because that's the height in the ag district.
Okay, very good.
But if you were to span multiple base districts, we would have to incorporate either for data centers set a specific height. That
Okay.
would be the most sense if you're going to go multiple underlying districts.
Okay.
Question, the Bitzers and those properties, what are they zoned at currently? Are they agricultural as well or something else?
There are two.
R2.
So what's the R2?
I have to look.
If you don't,
Sure.
I just would say that if we go back to, what you said, if it expands more, you'd have to pick one.
I think it's
My
35
sense
feet.
would be the lower height.
To avoid,
Confusion.
you'd have to probably set in specific standards for data center. It's this height.
And then that should meet what Chief Stevens said as well.
That would make sense.
That'd be my recommendation. If we change the overlay, spans multiple zoning areas, we look across those, and whatever the least height is, that's what we stick with.
So the R2 zoning district is 35 feet maximum height.
Okay.
So if you're gonna do that, though, shouldn't you do that in anticipation that you could cross over?
Well, that's what I'm saying, right, so that it gets kind of in here to address that. If, whether it's today, tomorrow, or 2 years from now, if the overlay gets expanded and it crosses multiple zoning, it's already laid out that it's lower. Now, obviously, if someone starts and it's only in agricultural and they build something at 55 feet, they're obviously grandfathered, much like other folks until we make some change, but at least it's there, right?
So do we have any zoning areas that would be lower than 35 feet? I mean, obviously, we're not going to R1, but
I don't think so. 35 is standard for the residential.
I agree, I think 35.
Again, it's about if it spans more than one type of zoning, we pick the low out of all. If it spans 3 different zoning areas, we look across and pick the lowest number.
If we're subdivided and the lot is entirely on agricultural, then they will be able to go to 55 feet. And we're only talking about that.
That's the downside, I guess. Right?
And let me ask you, does that only include if the building is set? I mean, if we have a parcel that's straddling the line, so much is in R2, so much is in agriculture, 60% is in agriculture, and the building is all put on the agricultural side. Is that going to mean?
That would be the reason to if we're gonna do multiple base districts, to come up with a specific height. So you don't have to work, I mean, it just would unnecessarily complicate it, especially if you can see that problem arising in the future, which everyone in this dais can, would be to just avoid that and set a specific height. Because you can do that in the standards here. I mean, that's.
So my question is that too restrictive to create a 35 height? Because they would then need to go to zoning hearing board for a variance, or they would challenge us, correct?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I do not know what what the functional best height or practical height is for a data center. So we would have to research that and figure out, well, if, you know, because obviously they couldn't do it at 12 feet, but I'm sure they could do it at 70 feet. So there's clearly somewhere in between there. So we would have to figure that out in the same way that the buffer yards, it's the same principle. It has to be practical for them to actually do the use in the standards you're outlining.
So then we go back to the principle, like we put with buffers, which is go to the max, in this case, the minimum height that we can defend.
I agree.
I mean, I agree, but I also, I mean, I think, like, I think we need to get some more information. I think it's kind of, you know, if there is not a AI building at all built to 35 feet, and they're all, the smallest one in Pennsylvania is 45 feet, I mean, who are we kidding? And we don't know that answer. So I think they, go back to the square foot of the buildings. I think we need to figure out what is coming down the pipe with buildings, instead of just saying 150,000 square feet, 300,000 square feet, and there's none of them, they don't build them that
Well,
size.
and I agree with that, and that gets back to kind of our principle that we laid out for the buffers, you know, go for the max that's defendable. I think in this situation would be, you know, what's the minimum height that is defendable because of, you know, fire protection and emergency services and things of that nature, right? And once that information's found out, it could be placed into this ordinance and again, be defendable so that someone can't come in for the exact reason you mentioned.
So we're settled on that. Okay.
I'll move past the setbacks and buffer strips because I think we fit that. I'll move past the buffer strips and screening unless anyone has any specific comments on that. I know that everyone wants the max. There are some specifics in here for vegetation and plant units and things like that. I'll pause if anyone has comments.
I think just as long as it's maintained, it's been the biggest issue I think we've hit on here, if I remember.
Well, that we already address, and we do a pretty good job of, so.
Yeah, yes. So, in our current zoning ordinance, it does address maintenance of landscaping and buffer strips. And in fact, our zoning officer just went out and enforced that in our industrial district. The problem is that a lot of those buildings were built when we didn't have a very good landscaping ordinance back then when those plans were recorded. So you can't really do anything with those, but going forward, we can. So yeah, this would all be enforceable per the zoning ordinance, the existing zoning ordinance.
Yeah, and within that, at O here in this subsection, we have that landscaping plans along with a landscaping management plan is required at the time of the application for a special exception. And additionally, they have to provide a financial security for ongoing maintenance of the landscape buffer.
Yeah, we've come a long way with the buffers. During the LD, we can request certain species, and we have, so, yeah, we've got that.
And I know we already passed the line of sight, but we also have a line of sight section in our ordinance now, and you guys know that because we make them give us drawings in their LD plan for it.
If we're on the buffer here, this whole page 4, everything's gonna be revised to say 500. Front, side, rear, buffers, regardless of what zoning that you're up against. Everyone want, is that what, so, because this one says, you know, if it's so many square foot of a building, you know, you can.
Yeah,
So
right now
we're
it's a
going to
sliding
five,
scale.
we're going 500 on everything.
That is my,
Again, defendable as far as we can take it to the max.
Yeah.
As
So
long
if
as
that's
it's
the number,
defendable.
That was my opinion.
Okay, so.
So whether it's 100,000, 250,000,
Yeah, so this
or
whole, we're gonna simplify this whole page here.
yeah, he's gonna do some research and figure that out, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm allowed to speak, but I did just look this up. There's a planning manager in Virginia who apparently did some research on this. He said an average data center story measures 35 feet. Most data centers have at least 2 stories, and the chillers and rooftop equipment are installed above the roof height. So that's 70 feet.
But that's
plus.
Virginia, and that's
Right,
their
Yeah.
ordinances or whatever
Right,
drives them.
but I just, it's
No,
kind of
appreciate
just a
it.
general idea of what they're looking at for sizes, that's kind of what.
Understand, and what we're looking for is, just like we said, when it comes to buffers, we want to try and maximize it to where it's defendable. When it comes to height, we want to minimize it to where we're defendable, and then it can't be changed.
So we're good with page 4? I think we're pretty good with page 5.
yeah, I need to page 6, but I'm happy to, we can circle back.
And this also discuss the buffer, the makeup of the buffer, and the percentage of the plants and stuff, and I think we got a real good, staff has a real good plan on that. Anyone have anything to say about plantings and buffers? And we'll move on to substations.
Right now, we have substations, are considered accessory use, which is fine, and shall not be located within 300 feet of a residential district or existing occupied residential dwelling. They are included in the sound studies. We can look at moving that back.
500 feet?
We look at that, yeah, again, with the height, have to make sure that everything's viable.
Is everybody okay if we stay with the 500?
Again,
Whatever's
follow
defensible.
the principle we laid out.
Yep.
Comes to buffers, we go to max that we can defend.
For utility connections, so for power, bearing power lines, strongly encouraged. Written verification from the applicable service provider stating that adequate capacity is available. Utility supply equipment and related electrical infrastructure are sufficiently sized and can safely accommodate the proposed use. Any system designed for cooling will be adequate and will not negatively impact the surrounding region. The use will not cause electrical interference or fluctuations, and the electrical work is passed third-party final inspection.
Question, this is where the township only has so much room to push, because otherwise you get into like the Pennsylvania Utility Commission's backyard, right?
Yeah, exactly, and extensive federal regulation, I mean, even beyond that. And in Pennsylvania, utilities are completely exempt from zoning. I mean, so things like power lines are not something the township has any power over. But some of this stuff, you know, proving that they.
So we're putting in as much as we legally can without overstepping our bounds.
That's the goal, yes.
So we, you know, FERC and PUC oversteps us. Utility connections, I have a note here that backup generators. You know they're gonna have backup generators, any plant would. And I just feel that we should request that to be in an enclosed building to mitigate the sound from the exhaust, if at all possible. That's not infringing on PUC rights. I even think if burying certain lines starts to infringe on the PUC, but, and First Energy, what they would allow. But the backup generator, when those generators kick on, I don't want windows rattling in Saginaw. So I feel it should be enclosed.
Speaking of power lines, don't we have in our ordinance, they have to be buried? Everybody comes in and asks for a waiver.
They do.
So I think we should just let it in there and
Oh, I say we let it in and require them to bury it, but,
require lines to be buried, yes.
but if there's something that First Energy objects to, that's different. But
I do agree with your comment on backup generators. again, we think that would also be addressed by the noise ordinance to some degree, if not in all degrees, because it is producing sound, vibration, and our new noise ordinance addresses that. And we do link from this ordinance into our noise ordinance as well. So whether it's enclosed or not, they ultimately have to meet that noise ordinance and show how they're gonna mitigate something that exceeds it.
That's true, but I've read, I've done a ton of reading lately, but I can't go for a three-sided opaque structure.
And I agree with
On
you,
the-
I'd like to do that again, if
backup
it's
generator.
defendable, right?
If it's dependable, I don't see why it wouldn't be if we required it enclosed.
I work with a lot of these generators and backup generators and do some contract work with them. Almost everyone I deal with is fully enclosed.
Okay. So it's
That's
not,
not a hardship. That should be, for whatever engineer or professional design team puts this together. They may try not to want to do it, but it's a very standard thing. It's not a hardship for them to do that.
Appreciate that.
thank you.
It's good information. So is that something we can include and specify specifically?
Yeah, and I would think, shooting from the hip a little bit.
Sure.
I haven't done the research, and it's not a field I work in. Assuming that is something that they can do, then.
And we can defend it and so forth, then I would agree with the comment, yeah, prefer it to be enforced.
Water and sewer. Public central water and sewer facilities shall be provided. If existing public capacity is insufficient, they must demonstrate alternative measures showing all water and sewer needs will be met without expansion of township services or facilities. And then there's also further water provisions later on.
Well, let's scratch the surface on the water. I heard the lows, and we're all familiar with the quarry back there. I'm gonna go out on a limb and play devil's advocate. I say they don't use groundwater. No groundwater use at all. And if they do require something from the river, then they do, but it'd be a closed loop system. Because I don't want pollutants going back into the river. I don't want pollutants going back into the groundwater. So I think it's defendable for us to say that. And just my opinion, just to get conversation going. Is that
Excuse me,
defendable?
Chairman, I think we need to try and get closer to the mics, folks may not, because I couldn't hear you through the speaker.
I'm saying that we require that they don't use groundwater at all.
I mean, that'd be my preference, because I gotta believe, most of the folks in here, much like myself, are on wells, so while I'm not, in spitting distance of the areas that we're talking about, I'd be concerned about it as well.
So I want to make myself clear. I'm talking for cooling purposes. For potable water, that's different. But for cooling purposes, we request that they cannot draw from the ground.
And again, we gotta be on defendable.
Yeah, that would make me, I would be somewhat nervous about that, saying that they couldn't draw any water at all for any sort of cooling. But we can look into it. I mean, it's something to consider.
Because we would be telling them not to use groundwater on ground they own.
Yeah, I think there could even be I'd have to look into that, but off the top of my head, that would potentially be a few issues, including due process.
Well, because I'm also thinking along the lines of what you said, Chairman Mayor, that the applicant must demonstrate alternative measures showing, if they don't have water, showing that all the water and sewer needs will be met without expansion of the township services. Protects township services. It doesn't protect just the general welfare of the topography and underwater. Fine, we're not going to expand township services, but we tapped into something nearby and everybody's well went dry. We can't have that either. But that's all it stipulates is that, well, you just need to prove township services aren't going to need to be expanded. Am I oversimplifying how that's?
This is just one thing, and then we also have a fairly extensive water
Right, that's down
feasibility
further.
study. So I think this is just thinking more in a utility sense.
Okay.
Okay. We'll wait.
Well, how close is the nearest public utility? I mean, I've encountered, if you're within so many feet of a public utility, you have to attach to it. And it can be expanded, and it has held up on zoning ordinances. I know,
Sewer's 150 feet, that I do.
if you're within 150 feet of a public
The
sewer,
front, the nearest corner of your building, I forget the exact definition, but I know it's 150 feet for certain, for sewer. I don't know what other things are.
is that the limit though? I mean, would it be quarter mile? That they would have to extend public sewer or public water,
Is your question, we would make it so that they would have to extend if they were within a mile from it, or, I'm sorry, I'm not sure.
within a distance that, like you said, 500 feet for setbacks, but I know and encountered, in development that if you're within a certain range, you have to extend the public water to your site.
Yeah, I think if the township wanted to make them hook up, potentially, that would be something we could look into doing. I think my understanding was that we would like them to not be on potentially township utilities.
So currently, our Saldo requires public water, public sewer, but that is meant for, you know, restrooms and things like that, not the processing here. So I just wanted to clarify that.
The cooling
has its Okay.
own.
Yeah.
That's what we're getting to later.
Right.
I was just assuming that they're going to extend the line to the sewer treatment plant down there and use the sewer and public water.
And public water.
Yeah.
And then, if we're looking at the cooling, it's my understanding that, what are we looking at? The maximum that we have a line with 6 inch maybe, you know, a line in Saginaw that, I mean, there's,
They wouldn't use that water though for cooling.
right,
No.
they can,
No.
so. And then we talked about the underground aquifers, I mean, it sounds like they do some agricultural use out there and the water's affected. So I'm just saying, I mean, the river's right there, there's the quarry there, I think it should be a totally looped system that's isolated, no ground, I agree with you, no groundwater should be touched. And I actually think they're gonna find out that they're not gonna get the yields that they need and to replenish it on a daily basis.
You know, and we can address it when we get closer to the cooling, but even when you
Yeah.
initially fill the cooling system, you find some water somewhere else, tank it in, you don't even do an initial fill off our water.
Right. So I just don't want to say August and we're in a drought, and all of a sudden that quarry's dry, that they're using water for the cooling. I don't want to see that. So that's why I don't, you know, I agree, groundwater is secondary at best.
Why not make them have their own tank system with a filter system?
Excuse me?
Well,
Nope, sorry. Go ahead.
Question on the water system. Do we require or ask that they do a closed loop water system?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think we're gonna get to that part down there.
Okay.
For aesthetic standards, it says that show blank exterior walls, illustration, monuments, building facades, things of that nature. Does anyone have any specific questions or comments, thoughts?
Are you okay if we talk about C here? Equipment used for cooling, ventilating or powering the facility, including emergency power generators and other emergency supply equipment. And then it says here, the verbiage says, when located closer to an adjacent public road or adjacent residential use than the principal building. And it must be contained within an enclosed building. So we already have it there. And I think we should strike the words "or be encompassed on 3 sides by a located barrier extending at least 12 inches in height above the mechanical equipment and screened from view." So that's telling me, am I reading that correctly, that the stuff that goes on the roof should be in a penthouse?
Yes. Well, this is for, I mean, just generally all support, I mean, roof, I think we have rooftop here at 6, which gets more into some of that stuff.
Right, let's get down to that then. Is everybody okay above that? The facade and all that? Okay.
Yeah, so for rooftop, we say all rooftop mounted equipment shall be screened by parapet wall, equipment penthouse, or visually solid screen. So that's a little bit different than we have there up at 5E, but similar intent.
So I'll ask Troy down there, because he's an expert in this, but we've always traditionally been soft on some of this stuff about putting up a screen barrier or parapet wall. I like the use of a penthouse myself, that it's enclosed. It helps enclose the sound.
Well, you can't put chillers and stuff.
You can't put them in a penthouse.
No, because they have the fan on top there and get removed. You can put the parapets around them, but you cannot put them in a penthouse.
Okay. Because I didn't know if you put the penthouse around it with cooling water and the stacks are out the top.
I don't think so.
Okay.
So I mean, as it's written now, that would allow 4 parapets or equipment penthouses, I guess, depending on the type of equipment. So with that, are you satisfied?
Yeah.
I just want to say that if it was sound that you're worried about, and I know that you already know this, but for the room, is that if their, sound study determined that that was the cause of noise or vibration, they would be required to do some kind of mitigation to stop that.
But even during the development plans, they have to model the equipment they're using and what kind of sound it throws off and prove through that analysis that how they're building it will meet or exceed the requirements of a noise ordinance.
And we've already had practice with dealing with that with industrial buildings now, and that's what they do, so.
Excuse me, I have nothing about this, but I'm parked in, so somebody with a dark gray Outback, has parked me so I can't get out. I have a kid, I gotta get to that. So if anybody drives a dark gray or black Outback,
Anyone with a dark gray or black, what, Subaru Outback?
no, it's over here. It's on like the
On
far
that side
side
of the
over
building.
here.
On the far side heading up the hill.
Older couple who got out ahead of me, and it rides how close they parked me.
I think we may have a winner.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any more comment on the rooftop?
Are we okay with the rooftop facilities there?
Yep.
Parapet and all that? Okay.
Lighting,
I think our lighting requirements for our industrial partners are, what would you say, layman, they're top notch?
Pretty good.
Yep.
all right. Noise control. So, I mean, we've talked about this in passing here, but any proposal for a data center would include at the zoning process, pre, during, and post-construction sound studies, maybe to examine all exterior utility functions of the building, which include rooftop and ground-mounted equipment that produce sound. And then the sound study shall be identify compliance with, obviously, the new sound study standards you guys have in chapter 137.
And that includes vibration as well, if I recall correctly.
Mhm.
That includes high frequency, low frequency, and air vibration and ground vibration. Yeah.
So it gets it all.
And we enacted this ahead of time with this in mind, with this use in mind. So it's brand new, and we're gonna, using Paxwood, I think it is, or consultant.
Does anyone have any further thoughts or questions?
Yeah, this is something that we enacted, but we haven't actually used it yet, to my knowledge.
Correct.
So when we go to do this, you'll do a preliminary sound study. From what I've been reading, you've got the vibration issues, the coolers and everything, but these data centers have to have constant power. So I read a story about a place where a data center was actually down on power for about 2 weeks, and they were running those generators, the diesel generators, which created the issue of the noise of those, plus the exhaust, which was the poison in the air. with not just a normal operating procedure, but also what happens in an emergency, and not just hypothetical, but actual real life as well?
We require generators be included here, both rooftop and ground mounted. So, I mean, that would be part of the sound modeling study that they do, and those are pretty detailed, and they'll model out even in different decibels at 50 feet, 100 feet, 150 feet, you know, to the property line and beyond.
I think what they require is they get all the data from all the manufacturers and put that into their model, and they project the model, use topography and everything to where the sound's going. And then once it's built, I think we'd have like a dress rehearsal where our engineer would go down there and they'd fire up all the generators to make sure that everything is within our specs. That's what I envision.
And that's perfect, that's what happens, but I know my truck estimated gas mileage is 25, and I don't get anywhere near that. So, just because they state that doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean that's what they're at.
No, that's a fair, valid point.
Fair, yeah.
But that's why it's pre-construction, goes through all planning commission, if they require some variance, and we can ask those questions about did the model factor this and that, and then the reality is, once it's built, they've gotta go through it as well. A sound study of what's actually out there and what's been built.
So we may approve something based on calculations that they have at the time, but we will have a means to go back if they do real-life measurements afterwards, which we're gonna require.
Yes.
Then they have to mitigate it and pretty much give us the goods they sold us on.
And to that point, how quickly can we enact the sound study? So in other words, if the power goes down and they've got a generator that's running obnoxiously loud, and then all of a sudden we order our sound study and they fix the electric and the generator's off, how do we control that?
It's probably likely that they'll have it fixed before that process could be completed. Because you have to literally hire an engineering firm that specializes in that. We have to send out a cease and desist letter or whatever it is in that standalone ordinance, which would probably have to be reviewed by the solicitor and then mailed out. Now, I can tell you, everyone knows Bruner Island had an instance where a loud sound was happening, and we got a hold of our attorneys ASAP as soon as we found out about it. But what happened even quicker was us just getting a hold of them and calling them and saying, what's going on? What are you going to do about this? Things are going to happen. This is definitely the most preventative kind of language and action that we're going to require out of anyone we've ever seen. So we're going to do everything we can in this ordinance to prevent it from happening, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen or it won't happen.
Am I misreading something in here where I was talking like we are gonna do a study?
Mm-hmm.
They need to test their generators anyway, and they have to have them up for several hours. You coordinate with when they're doing that, and you have the sound engineering people that are gonna measure it. I mean, we don't leave this to chance, well, we gotta wait till the power's out. No, they
Right.
have to test the generators, and part of the testing should be, they're running those generators, we know ahead of time, because they gotta set that up, and they have a bunch of standards with that, because it is backup power. You get somebody in there to have the sound study same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to coordinate that, because that's what I was referring to with dress rehearsal.
Right.
To get everything running so that we can do our study.
Yeah, and the other thing is, it goes back to what you said, you enclose these generators. That's gonna cut back on a lot no matter what.
Yeah. So with if we go with max buffer and we have these heavy setbacks and then you have all these noise studies and things, to be honest, when we were at that aesthetic standards, I was curious if we're even going to see this thing, to be honest. So I wasn't sure why the aesthetics even mattered, but I guess the big hope here is that with all the preventative measures, we should not have that issue.
Well, and with the millions and billions of dollars this means to the companies that put this in, they'll do what we tell them to do.
Yeah, Bruner
They
Island
really
acted
will.
really
They
quick.
got the
Yeah.
money. If it even sounds like it's over the top, I don't care.
Right.
As long as it's defendable, from an ordinance standpoint, I want to make it as expensive as we possibly can and get all the bells and whistles to protect the residents.
Yeah, we want to definitely take them up, so to speak, to the governor
Yeah.
and push the limit.
So I just hear rumbles in my ear here. So we're gonna do a dress rehearsal where we have a provision where we can go back and actually periodically test it while it's running in an operation after the fact, or is it just a dress rehearsal?
Well, so you have the interim sound study conducted during the building permit process. All of the pre, during, and post require all exterior utility functions of the building to produce sound. So you would get all of that, again, the model, then while they're building it, and after. And then we do have this provision here that says a post-construction sound study shall be completed within 6 months of the issuance of certificate of occupancy and may be required thereafter by the township upon request. So in theory, if you're having issues going on down that way, but also if they're violating the sound ordinance anyway, that would be a zoning violation, and then you could pursue them legally that way.
Correct.
And then just one follow-up question on that. These acts are not free when they do these studies, so do we have a provision that forces the data center to pay for every one of these?
Yeah, well, these studies that he outlined, they would pay for. Now, if we get a bunch of complaints that it's noisy down there, I can't sleep, yada, yada, and staff says, yes, there is a problem, then we send Paxwood down there to do a study. We would initially pay for that study, which is not cheap, but we're willing to do that. And if we do find out that they're in violation, then we have in our ordinance that they pay the bill. And they remediate the problem, correct the problem.
And for what it's worth, I mean, we're discussing it openly, but that is a very robust noise control ordinance we have built in here.
Yeah, it is.
And I also just want to add something to what Dave just said about how we would have to eat the cost at first. We hashed out last year all the legalities of why we are required to eat that cost if they're not in violation. So trust me when I tell you, go back and read those minutes from 2025 when we were talking about this, and that'll explain why we have to eat that until we prove they're in violation, okay?
Can we add, or should we add a provision where they just can't bring in a mobile generator due to some infrastructure issue they're having with their current generator? So just, for those they just pull in, sit on site somewhere and they're not protected for sound.
That's a good point.
That's the same with, it is a great point, because they'll bring in mobile chillers too. Go in flatbeds and line 6 of them up, and where are they gonna park them? That's a great point.
Well, we'd have the setback rule for that, but the sound rule, till we would react,
Right.
it's too late. Because government works slow, I was told when I first got this job. So I think we need to incorporate something that temporary facilities gotta meet a certain standard.
Yeah, I mean, I think the temporary facilities would have to meet the sound standard. I don't know that we could say that they couldn't bring in a generator if they needed it.
Oh, no,
or
just
cooling
that they
if
need to
needed
meet the
it.
sound standard. You
But yeah,
can't
they would
stop
have
them
to
from
meet,
doing it.
anything they did there would have to meet, anything anyone does anywhere has to meet the sound standard. And we have the specific provisions here for the data center tying in the noise ordinance that you guys already have separate in chapter 137.
So
Yeah.
you're saying we're covered.
Yeah. I
By
mean,
our
you could-
existing ordinance, we're covered.
Good with that, Darryl?
I'm gonna follow up with one more question then. Under that kind of situation where they bring in temporary stuff, what happens in the event that they decide they wanna upgrade or change their equipment? Will we have testing that happens at that point as well?
I think if they changed it, wouldn't that require another plan submission?
Yeah, they'd have to submit.
Oh, it really depends. It really depends. So there's a definition for what triggers a land development plan. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
What would trigger? If it's not something that triggers the land development plan and it's just a mere building permit, then the answer is no. But once again, that it would then be governed by the existing noise ordinance, that if there is an issue, then we would investigate it, issue notification, and handle it through that ordinance for the enforcement process.
Then maybe we better have some language in there that say, is there any modification or change of equipment triggers another sound study that they pay for?
I'm not a lawyer,
Yeah,
but I've heard Andy enough
Yeah,
that,
I would be somewhat wary to say that we would be able to do that and just, go back and make them zone redo that as part of their zoning. They would certainly, as Christie said, have to still comply with the noise ordinance. They couldn't come in, they're not grandfathered in under their old equipment if they were to bring in noisier equipment.
Okay, the question is our reaction time and how we would get that. We pay for it because, you know, if they debate us on the payment, then we're gonna pay for it because we want it quiet. Plain and simple, but
I think if we would require something like that, that's a building code item. That's not a land development item for the MPC. So if we make them do it, then you make everybody do it. And I'm not sure if that's even something, once again, I'm not an attorney, but that would have to be applied fairly, probably across the board. And I can tell you that would be costly for, well, it would be costly for them, but that's not really our problem there, but I don't know what that means legally. So.
I mean, we do have the language in here that says a post-construction sound study may also be required thereafter by the township upon request. So, I mean, in theory, if there was a massive change in equipment, you guys could make that request.
okay. You ready to move on to fire, or where we at?
No, that's, yeah, fire.
I think, if I may, I think most of the fire issue is during a land development between the chief, because, just let me take this time to explain the process for everybody out there that how this happens. If we do receive a plan, is submitted, it comes into staff, staff sets a staff meeting date, and the developer and staff get together and they roughly go over the whole plan. And they start, it's like a big sieve, they start getting out the big chunks. And staff meeting takes care of that, and then it comes to the planning commission. And the planning commission runs it through their screens, gets rid of the stuff, and then comes to the board of supervisors. So it goes through many, many, many layers. And during those layers, the chief would go down where all the fire equipment, where they hook up their hoses, what their sprinklers are like, all that. So I don't think we have to go through, does anyone disagree, all this fire stuff coming down through?
I'm fine with it.
It's just the performance standards. So again, we do preempt this with, unless expressly preempted, all data center uses must comply with the performance standards set forth in 25540. The general statement here about air, dust, smoke, glare, exhaust, heat, or humidity, which you guys do have in your performance standards that are cross-referenced there. Then we have EMF. Unless anyone has any specific comments on the standards here.
The only comment I have is when down here in measurement monitoring of the EMF and exceed 2 milligauss. I'm sorry. So, yeah, I'm going to ask you, what does that mean? Do we have a consultant firm that comes out and measures that?
That would have to be, I mean, similar to the sound study, that would have to be how it would work.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So it says here not to exceed 2 milligauss. Anybody want to?
So they would submit to us their whatever study, whoever does that, they would submit it to us as a part of their application to meet this section of the ordinance. And then, you know, between staff, they would make sure our planner here or engineer will check that per the ordinance. He goes down these ordinances to make sure that they provide everything.
Okay, I'm all right with that. Layman, do you have a milligauss gauge?
Not quite.
Vibration. Very similar, you guys also do have some of that in your noise ordinance already.
Yeah, we made sure that's in there pretty good.
I had something to pass on to Robert. Make sure that's.
So we
Water
might have to
feasibility
get
study.
a special
Big one
engineer
here.
for this, like to
Okay,
double check.
I'm sorry, can I back up?
Situation.
Also, in the noise study and the vibration study,
Okay,
if we have a data center that's down in the valley. We have to make sure that our sound study and vibration study takes into account residents that are above that elevation.
I
So-
thought in our noise ordinance that it does include the topology, doesn't it?
It does include topography, but I just don't want us to forget that we need them to high and low
Right.
areas, so. Because I know Saginaw may be up there a little bit in elevation compared to what this would be. Okay, sorry.
A water feasibility study must be prepared by a qualified professional with the zoning permit application. The purpose of that study will be to determine if there's an adequate supply of water for the proposed data center and to estimate the impact of the data center on existing public system and/or wells in the vicinity. No data center shall be approved without sufficient water and/or that poses adverse impact on existing wells in the vicinity. If the source is from a municipal system or a public utility, the applicant shall include documentation that the public authority or public utility will supply the water needed. A water feasibility study shall include the following minimum information. That includes calculation of the projected water needs, a geologic map of the area with a radius of at least 1 mile from the site, the location of all existing and proposed wells within 1,000 feet of the site with a notation of the capacity of all high-yield wells, the location of all streams within 1,000 feet of the site and all known point sources of pollution. Based on the geologic formations underlying the site, the long-term safe yield shall be determined. A determination of the effects of the proposed water supply system on the quantity and quality of water in nearby wells, streams, and the groundwater table. Identification of how water will be recycled or released into surrounding water bodies. A statement of the qualifications and the signatures of the person or persons preparing the study. The applicant shall also provide proof of review and approval from the SRBC, the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, for projects that have water withdrawals of 100,000 gallons per day or more over a 30-day average from any source or combination of sources within the Susquehanna River Basin, or any consumptive water use of 20,000 gallons per day or more over a 30-day average from any water source. So I don't know if it's going to be all that.
I guess,
The question would be, just for definition, is the 1,000 feet from the site, is that the property line of the site of the data center, or is that the data center building?
Yeah, that's a good note.
Should be from the property line.
Yeah, the property line.
It's up to you guys. And my overall comment is this enough? You know, because again, a number of our residents are on well water here, and that's a driving concern. I realize the overlay of property is, I'm outside of the mile radius, but again, folks that are within it, just like to take stuff, as we said before, the principle is take it to the max where it's defendable. And is there anything else we can put in here to, you know, really protect our residents when it comes to this groundwater?
Well, I have a question, the ultimate question. What happens if people's wells start going dry? Because recently I just heard, again, my own, I hate to bring this in, but cause and effect. If my well goes dry, well, you prove it.
I understand, so the first part is, do we have enough to protect ourselves so we don't
Right.
get to that particular point? And then that is kind of the next question, and I think just in general, you know, put yourself in, you know, that entity's shoes that's operating that particular operation. It's like, well, prove it. Pretty much everyone says that to this day, right?
And that's what they said to me at the last meeting.
I mean, I don't know how we get around that, but the best way is to be proactive, and do we have
If you can put something in there.
enough strength in what we're laying out here to provide that level of protection? Is this enough? Can we go further? That's really the driving question, at least to me it is.
Well, I think we gotta realize that even if they're not using groundwater for coolant, but when they go in there for construction purposes and they start blasting and moving heavy equipment, it could change the aquifer and somebody's well could dry. So at least, at the very least, I think contiguous properties should have their wells tested prior to construction. And an escrow amount of money be up there in case of catastrophic, you know, the wells go dry.
I agree, 100%.
I mean, I think we've looked into it. I'm not sure that you can force them to go off their property and test other people's wells is the issue with that.
Yeah, I think that's what they told me.
Couldn't he request it? We can't force them to, but what if, you know, the property owner, I guess it's not gonna work either.
No.
If you invited it, well, they're not gonna do it because they're not gonna put themselves in a box.
And I was told that I can do it at my own expense, to have the well tested now, and quarterly or whatever, until they make it go dry. And then they said still,
You gotta prove it.
yeah, I gotta prove it, yeah, it's cause and effect, they sat here and told me that.
Well, then somebody down here said that these companies have a lot of money, so ponying up escrow amount in case we have
Yeah,
to
that's-
supply them water, drill a new well or whatever we need to do is covered.
Fine with
But then there again, we're creating another layer. We gotta track that escrow. We gotta, it's problematic, but not undoable. It's doable, but.
The only thing I was gonna say is, and I don't know what the other option is, but that would be like a financial security, and if they refuse to do whatever that, requirement would be, if we came into that situation, if they didn't do it, then we would go in and do it using that financial security. But I don't know if that's legal or not, is all.
Not necessarily putting that into the zoning regs, but having that in what we call our
Developers agreement.
developers agreement, which brings in a lot of stuff that we can ask for and negotiate for with them. And I think we must protect the citizens' water rights down there in Saginaw. We have to. So, however you can put it in those fancy words and make it stick.
I was just gonna say, financial security is something for public improvements, and I guess that wouldn't be considered a public improvement unless it could cover something else.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the goal is not to, expose people's wells to issues or
Yeah.
things like that. It just, there are strong property rights in the United States and the things that you can and can't force someone to do on their property. I mean, even zoning is a relatively new concept and, it's only 100 years old in the grand scheme of things in the US. There are just limitations on some of the things you could force someone to do. I mean, we can look into some of that, but I think this was the feedback that Andy had given before, is that that's just a hard, I don't think you can do that.
It would be.
Again, I think I come back to the principles that we're at least trying to guide ourselves by, is, push it to the limit to where it's defensible. And the same, to me, applies to this water, right? And then where we can, I think, possibly with a developer's agreement and things of that nature, something could be structured to do something beyond potentially. But I don't want to put something in the ordinance where we wind up risking, someone piercing through it.
Yeah, and hopefully, going through the review with the Susquehanna River Basin Commission and things like that, where if they're taking these massive water withdrawals, I mean, those are the kind of things that is that's what they focus on, that's their expertise. I mean, I've been to seminars where they talked about, that consulting process with them. I know Sarah was there too. I mean, so, hopefully that's the type of, not hopefully, those are the type of things that they are looking at in that process.
So it's nothing that would have a high degree, we can't put the force of law behind it with what you're believing is. If there's a low degree, you'd be able to defend that. But to your point, it can be highly negotiated.
Correct.
On what would be an otherwise good parcel of land for them to make billions of dollars.
Correct.
And it goes back to what I said, you just jab them for every penny we can get out. At some point, they're gonna walk and color me disappointed.
Right, and that's
But
fine.
if they're gonna build it, it's not gonna come at the expense of everybody else around it.
Exactly.
So you just
And-
push the envelope.
Yes, and they're gonna come in and ask for waivers. Everyone does. So that's negotiating chip.
This is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay, that takes us to 7, identification of how water will be recycled or released in the surrounding water bodies. That takes us to closed loop system. And I know the cooling technology is changing as we speak here. And who knows, tomorrow they may not need water, they'll use gel, but who knows? But like I'll reiterate what I said earlier above, that is, we don't want anything injected into our lands. We don't want anything going back into the river. That's not good. We have enough of that upstream. So a closed loop system makes sense to me, but I'm not an engineer.
For the cooling they need, pulling 50-degree water out of the creek isn't gonna give them the cooling they need. They're gonna use chillers. Chillers operate closed loop. I mean, I can't imagine somebody's gonna engineer pulling out fresh groundwater or natural water and then discharging after it's been heated and throwing in the thermal heated water back in, and what that does to the ecology with the fish and everything, and then pulling. I don't think they have the thermal capacity BTU-wise to cool what they need to cool.
And we would certainly not allow that in the quarry.
Right.
Put heated water in the quarry. So it sounds to me like they're gonna have to run a line from the river. And I think that's one of the reasons why this land was so appealing to them, is because of the power and water. So,
Well, I'll just make one other comment, you know, down in Northern Virginia, which they, you know, touted a couple of places are the data center capital of the world, most of those facilities aren't near a body of water. So they need that stuff, they'll get it in and do whatever they need to do. It's back to the economics of the project.
so then they would get their water from York Water Company.
Potentially so, which then would be, you know, but again, I just come back to the principle that we're laying out, you know. In all these sections, push it as far as possible to protect our residents without going too far to where we put ourselves at risk of getting overturned.
Okay.
And then there's no protection.
Exactly, and that's, you know, I don't see a change in that principle for us, I don't hear anything different, so I hope that helps.
I'll move to emergency responders. Shall coordinate with East Manchester Township, the East Manchester Township Emergency Management Coordinator and Fire Chief for radio coverage for emergency responders, installing systems to meet compliance.
We just wanna make sure our firefighters can talk to each other. That's what we're asking.
That's
And
something
police.
we routinely do.
Yeah.
Just the coverage of their, doesn't matter if it's a data center or a warehouse.
Right.
We're able to enforce, that they put a system which can do radio service for them.
And that'll be,
That's common.
that'll be talked about in the staff review, so.
My question on that one was, do we need to say East Manchester Township Public Safety Radio Communication, or should we York County?
Right, just what it is.
I mean, we have a radio system here for a highway crew, but not for the bonfire.
Yeah, it should be, York County
Yeah.
911 system or something to that effect that reflects the countywide radio system.
And that would include police and fire in the US.
Number 13, environmental impact assessment. So environmental impact assessment is required to be performed by an engineer, ecologist, environmental planner, or other qualified individual. It will include a description of the proposed use, the location, relationship to other projects or proposals with data to impact, data and detail sufficiently to assess the environmental impact. It will include a comprehensive description of the existing environment and probable future effects of the proposal, to focus on the elements of the environment most likely to be affected, as well as potential regional effects and ecological interrelationships. It will also include things like air pollution impacts, and some of that is regulated at a level higher than the township, which we should just note here. Potential for public nuisance, a stormwater management plan, a PA share report, an assessment on the goals of the impact on the county and township comprehensive plans, a description of alternatives to any potential impacts, adverse impacts that cannot be avoided, impact minimization, mitigation steps, critical impact areas. So that's things like floodplains, riparian buffer areas, steep slopes, things like that. Any specific, I mean, I've breezed through a page and a half there.
Any questions or comments about that?
I'll just add that we have a whole ordinance on stormwater management. So if you don't see those specifics in here, it's because it crosses over. We have a giant book of codified ordinances that those items don't need to be put into here. This is just to get added to our current book of existing ordinances, okay?
Threatened and endangered species requires a PIND, which incorporates different feedback from both state and federal agencies on fish, game, wildlife in the area. If they're going to be removing trees, there might be mitigation factors involved. If it's I don't know, something you see in Pennsylvania, Indiana bat or something, that'll flag that. They'll have to comply with those. Green building techniques. Encourage to implement low-impact development practices in site design and energy efficiency. Gets into the nitty-gritty of site design, energy and resource efficiency.
So moving on to solar. Is it a good idea for us to require all our industrial partners, and this one included in the future, to have solar panels on the roof to help mitigate their usage? Just a question.
It's something that, does the fire chief have any comment on that? As far as you got all those panels on the roof, I just kind of wanted to talk about that anyway. What's that do to hamper or not?
It's a building code item.
It creates significant challenges to it. There's no way to fully de-energize that system. So it creates a lot of hazards for us. And if we were to have a significant fire, then of course we can't then let the resources on there. So it creates even further challenges.
And then also, if the buildings weren't built to have load-bearing, structures to support that, and we require it, unless it was going forward, I don't know what that would do legally, but we can't go back onto existing industrial for that.
This is one of those sections where I'd say it's, I mean, obviously all of it's the discretion of the board, but the idea behind it is potentially one way to minimize energy use, or put energy back on the grid, even through like a net metering program. But it's up to the board if they'd like to see that or not.
I guess the concern is what the chief has raised from a standpoint, if you recall you telling us about some incident, it was recent, a couple years ago, where you ran into that situation with the solar panels and you couldn't de-energize.
So, yeah, without naming names, we have a large distribution warehouse in the township already. A lot of it about 300,000 square foot facility. Entirely covered with solar panels. We can stop the energy from entering the building. We can go to the roof and shut down individual rows of panels to fully de-energize that and make it safe. You would have to touch each panel on the roof, and there are literally hundreds of solar panels.
So then,
So it would take us hours to de-energize.
so then based on that feedback, if we want to have this, then somehow in this ordinance, you need basically a major kill switch that de-energizes the whole rooftop array.
And I don't know that exists in
the big switch.
I don't think that's a possible.
But I mean, that's really what you're looking for is,
Oh, absolutely.
or some kind of kill switch where you could shut off major segments of something to de-energize.
Not unlike a, Mr. Cheap store. I have one button I can hit and shut down all the heat. So that same mindset.
Yeah, that methodology, however,
Since you're talking so much, I figure you should probably just have a designated mic. It's good information. You're giving good
yeah,
information.
but I mean, is there something that we can find out about that, or somehow we can layer, if it doesn't exist, but at least describe what our intent is?
Yeah, I mean, we could put something in the intent. I mean, the other thing would be, you wouldn't have to necessarily, you know, if you didn't require it here in 17, it wouldn't ever prevent anyone from putting solar on their roof. I mean, that would be an accessory use of solar in your zoning ordinance. So,
We simply have to address or resolve for the issue.
yeah, I mean, there are a few different ways to do, if we could go at it.
I think just from a safety standpoint, whatever the best
Sure.
way is.
Yeah, I mean,
But I have a solar system on my house, I was required to put in a disconnect switch, and also it doesn't backfeed in the bed head line. So I thought that's common and required by the code.
Yep, I would be certain that they have feedback or backfeed intercept into the utility system. I'm sure that's in place. I'm just thinking that the enormity of the system, there's no quick disconnect. There's just no way to do that.
There would be multiple disconnects, which takes time.
Right, but I mean, what the chief just described is in the current situation, you had to go panel to panel. So if there is something, again, looking to put something in there that maybe it's not, one switch does it all, but major segments, you know, takes out 50 panels at a time or something. But somehow to craft that in to at least provide, if they choose to do that, at least they have to get past that hurdle somehow. And again, not making it impassable, but technology does change.
And the other thing to keep in mind, you're speaking about putting these on the roof. We've already discussed the possibility of these buildings being taller. We already know that within the township, we don't own aerial apparatus and rely heavily on utility companies to supply that service to us. See where I'm going?
Yeah.
We're adding more and more and more to a point where what happens when mutual aid companies just say, enough's enough, we're not coming anymore.
Yeah, we're gonna have to address that separate issue. So I think it's fair to say that we should not make that a requirement. It's an option, but not a requirement.
I don't think there's any problem with having that be solar ready.
Right.
I think that's a good requirement, actually, maybe another cost prohibitive reason to bring up the number.
Okay. Solar ready,
Solar ready, and it gives us some options down the road.
Okay.
maybe chop C there, under 17.
That's what I was thinking.
So before we get into cooling, I want to still talk about electric usage and generation and stuff. What everybody in this room is probably thinking, the same thing I'm thinking, is that these buildings use a lot of energy. So what I would like to see, and I don't know if we can with the PUC or FERC, but some kind of assurance that this is not going to directly affect the pricing for our residents on the grid, because they're going to suck a lot of power. So whatever we need to do to have some kind of study done, or what we need to do, we got to protect all of us from this creating rising electric costs. Thoughts?
mean, I agree in principle, but it gets back to ultimately, that's not our purview, right? I mean, we don't have oversight over that. I mean, if there's some hoop to jump through, great, but again, we don't control that utility.
Josh Shapiro is proposing to put that cost on the developers. So you guys should all, am I not talking into the thing? You guys should all definitely reach out to the governor's office, and, you know, anyone you can, the senator, the representatives. You guys should be going to Harrisburg.
Elected officials to
Yeah.
encourage that bill to move forward, right?
Did that?
I can, put a comment on this.
Okay.
The, White House on January 16th urged the electrical grid. Trump administration initiated calls for PJM interconnection, which serves 67 million customers in 13 states, and DC to conduct emergency procurement auctions to address escalating electrical prices, growing reliability risk across the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States. So federal government's on it. You know what speed they move at, but that's trying to be addressed by PJM, which is our grid.
Okay, it sounds like no one has a magic bullet for that, so.
I do want to just kind of point out one thing, that when we talk about, I'm generally kind of anti-data centers to the extent that we can, but at the same time, some of these issues that we're talking about, the electric in particular, is not a township issue, it's going to be a regional issue. So to some extent, I almost like the idea of us having a data center here where we can use the developer agreements to kind of control some of the benefits that derive back to the township, maybe by the electric kind of situation, where if it goes to, let's say, Manchester Township or Conway Township, we still have the same issues, but we have zero benefit or zero control over what's happening.
Yeah, if it's gonna raise electric costs, it's gonna raise it for the entire region.
Right.
You're gonna pay it if it's 50 miles away, anyway.
Right.
Yeah, and there's really significant and even relatively recent case law, the ability for townships to regulate companies like this, that public utilities that spread out the rate, that they just won't let you do it, because the theory is, why would you let one township regulate a cost that's not just borne out by that township, it's borne out by the county, the state, you know, in this case PJM, I mean, that runs all the way to Chicago. So you just can't really touch the utilities very much when it comes to regulations. I mean, you can barely do highway occupancy stuff.
However, we could touch the developer that's coming in with this $1 billion. Everybody's throwing all these money around, $1 billion and stuff. Unlike the dump down in Windsor, solid waste, or what was it, Lehman, the incinerator given back to Manchester Township, a certain percent stuff. So I think Christie would do her due diligence and call the Manchester manager and see how they went about the ifs, ands, or whats of the incinerator payout. Because if they would help offset the cost of our taxes in our community, that would go a long way for the electric rates to go up here and there. Just a thought. We're not going to get anything from the electric company, but we could from the developer. And it could be a recurring thing. So.
Cooling. So a data center shall utilize the best available cooling technology as determined at the time of site plan approval for the process of this ordinance, purposes of this ordinance. Shall mean a cooling system or combination of systems that achieves the lowest reasonably achievable power usage effectiveness, minimizes potable water consumption, prioritizes water efficient technologies, demonstrates commercial availability and proven feasibility for data center applications, produces the least environmental impact considering energy demand, water use, waste heat potential, and local climatic concerns, and complies with noise requirements outlined in Chapter 137. And then I'll just preface with saying, you know, the theory with this is that it allows the township to be flexible as it is a fairly evolving technology. The data centers that were built in Loudoun County, for example, like we were talking about earlier in 2016, don't look like the data centers that were built in 2020 and don't look like the data centers that are being built now, just because it's changed so much. And we don't want to lock the township into a closed loop system if there's technology advancements that mean that something else is going to be quieter or more energy efficient. And this, in theory, gives you guys the flexibility to require whatever is the latest and greatest.
And so that'll get vetted through the land development, through planning and possibly zoning if they're asking for some kind of variance on that. And so we lean into our experts that would be available to us at that time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And to speak about what the chairman mentioned earlier, like if you gotta fill a system, or you're talking about cooling water, no public water, or, I mean, I don't know how legal that would be. Again, they're gonna own the land if they have water on their land. But, keep it so that they're not using public water for cooling.
That's correct, and during the land development plan, they may even be asked to create a tank, like she said earlier, that they use that for supplemental water or their cooling water. Keep it in their own campus, so to speak, and not use the groundwater. I think if we can at all create this ordinances so that it's the lowest impact possible to our residents. And if they can't live with that, then they can go somewhere else, you know? Yeah.
Exactly.
Just a clarification, because I've heard public water and groundwater,
Yeah.
apples and oranges.
Oh, I know.
Right? I just want to make sure that, you know, at the end of the day, it's about protecting the community. And public water, generally, most of us, if you're on it, probably get it from York Water Company, versus a number of us are on wells, which would be groundwater.
Yeah, so what I'm thinking is they have three options available to them. They have the river, they have groundwater, and they got York County water, city water. I don't see any other alternatives to that, unless they fill up a tank from tankers off-site to come in and fill their tank to recirculate it. That could be a fourth option.
But again, the other tie-in is back to the Susquehanna and River-based Commission, which oversees a pretty wide swath.
Yeah, and just the other thing to consider is, you know, because this is a special exception, the burden is on someone, whoever's applying for this, to show that they have the best applicable cooling technology. It's not on you guys to prove that, oh, they should be doing it. I mean, they have to come and say, and prove that they're doing
But through our planning commission, reaching out to any engineers we have on staff at that point in time.
Yeah, exactly.
We'd have to go through that vetting process.
But I think, you know, it's nice that the impetus is not necessarily, you know, on you guys to prove a negative that they're not doing something that they should. I mean, they have to prove that they're doing exactly what they need to be doing.
Thank you.
Decommissioning. This section requires a decommissioning plan. It requires that when a data center facility is deemed to have ceased operations, that they either make good faith efforts or that they post financial security for you guys to restore the land back to the way it was before. We can get into the nitty gritty on some of these subsections as you guys want. That's the high level.
What is our envision on decommissioning? Say this technology fizzles out in 15 years, there's all of a sudden a new one that takes its place, and they abandon these buildings. I don't want a ghost town there. So what is our vision for decommissioning?
Well, we have it laid out pretty good here in this, in that they gotta pay to get everything disconnected, they gotta pay to get rid of the building,
Okay.
demolish it, haul it out, plant whatever native field grass was there, disappear like they were never there.
And that's our vision, and we're okay with that. I am.
I think that's desired.
Yeah.
I mean, forgive my ignorance, what's the other alternative to that?
I guess I'll play worst case scenario, right? Whether the technology fizzles or not and changes, the entity that sets it up goes bankrupt. out of business, there are no funds left to do decommissioning, right? That's the worst case scenario.
So then you're talking another escrow.
Well, I'm just throwing it out there, you know, it's like if we're trying to prevent certain things and plan. So one thing that I usually ask myself, what's the worst that happens? So in this situation, the technology fizzles, the company's moving on to something else, they decide no longer want it, well, there's funds there, right? There's still an active operation, a viable business that's generating its income. Okay, so they could go through this and return the land back to what we've asked for. Agreed. Worse,
I was just gonna say, we get notices if someone's going through bankruptcy, and we're required to, you know, if we're holding financial security, for instance, I think our attorneys would advise us to turning those in, and I
so
think.
there's the answer.
Yeah, I think what would happen is we would end up doing it, possibly, and.
Well, that's the idea behind the finish.
Right.
Is that there's this bond that if you guys need to, invoke, you know, then for 110% of the estimated decommissioning cost, that gets updated every 5 years. You guys have the funds to do that.
Okay, so there's the answer in the worst case scenario, they go bankrupt, it's there, it's already in place, we just need to.
There's no way to hide in that financial security, because it's not their land, but Ed had brought up, you have these wells that they're gonna say, prove it. They went dry. Well, they were working fine, the wells were fine. A data center shows up, they're not fine anymore, they say, prove it, well, you really can't. But in a sly way, I don't think it would work, and just a workaround that would probably get thwarted. But you have in that financial security, no, you're gonna return this area the way it was before you showed up, which means working wells.
What do we do on the solar farms? Is that the same thing we said? They have to return the land back to the way it was?
That it would be their
Yeah, we did.
land, like their parcel, so the well on your property might not
Right.
legally, but, I mean, again, everything you can negotiate it out as far as you can.
Yeah, I mean, what I meant was, I thought we hold a surety on these solar farms if they go bankrupt to return the property back to what it was.
That's a very common, you see that in a lot of solar ordinances, that they have
Yeah.
decommissioning
I
requirements.
mean, that's what we're saying we would do here?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
The bond never runs out.
They're set to be unexpired. That's how we write it now. They used to be 1 year, and that was
It's
trouble to
reevaluated
deal
every
with and
5.
follow up with.
In this ordinance, it said that it has to be reevaluated every 5 years.
And not
So
so.
that lets things escalate as costs escalate.
But Dean brought up a good point. We don't want them to leave town. We experienced that before, where all of a sudden no one's around to pay the bill, so we've got to protect ourselves and have money escrowed.
So we can't use that area down there as industrial, you know, we can't have someone that is incompatible to the same use to ever go in that building.
No,
So
it-
finding a tenant then was gonna be pretty hard.
Yeah, no, I mean, because it would still be zoned, I mean, it would be zoned for the use of a data center, so you couldn't do a warehouse in it. It would be, I mean, you're just not zoned for that.
Right.
Back to farming.
Construction transportation plan. Any proposal for a data center shall include a construction transportation plan. And we have some things that is required to include. Timeline, proposed routes, an estimate of average daily trips and peak hour vehicles, proposed hours of which that be happening, coordination with PennDOT, York County Emergency Services, school districts, other affected agencies where applicable. Happy to get into weeds.
Well, speaking of weeds, let's get into the weeds there. I think at least we should have our Public Works Director create a video examination of all the roads prior to construction. All our roads, the edges, the corners. With these heavy trucks coming in here, they start pushing the blacktop, and we want to get that mitigated, you know, through that. So we have a video examination pre and post construction.
And is that funded by the developer?
Yes, would be funded by the developer. And any remediation that needs done for a corner or the edges or anything like that would be paid for by the developer.
So.
I can't speak for state roads though.
So right now, what we do is we do video our roads, and then they also video the roads too. And then yes, if they do any damage by the end, they are already required to fix that. I'm not sure, I was just speaking with Layman here, I'm not sure if that's already in the ordinance. We'd have to look, but it might be in the Saldo already.
Okay, if it is, then we're covered.
So if you could just look that up to make sure that's covered. But that is just a common practice that we've always done.
Because there's gonna be some heavy truck construction vehicles, but once this, from what I understand, once a building like this is built, then the traffic going in and out of it is minimal. So I'm being told. Sorry.
That takes us to the end of the substance of the ordinance, then, definitions.
Definitions, financial securities, and all that stuff will be worked out with, that's boilerplate.
Yeah, so these are, most of these definitions came from the York County Planning Commission's model ordinance.
Okay. Anything we want to revisit, missed, talk about?
Just one, I can't find it, I wrote it down in my notes. It had to do with what we just talked about, was you used the word if required for like a sound study, if required, and I think you should just say shall be required.
Okay.
Sorry, just where?
I'm being ignorant on that.
Because the sound studies are required or during and post, and then we say another post may be required thereafter upon request, which is just what we talked about.
If required only shows up 4 times in the document. So, let's see here. One of them is under measurements and monitoring, which is under the EMF section. There's been 3 Roman numeral 3 cells. Just a second, sorry. 10 under performance standards, then C, then 3, then Roman numeral 3. So,
If required, yeah. So the township requires the applicant shall provide pre-construction baseline measurements of EMF and post-construction verification demonstrating compliance to make that mandatory.
I mean, if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, I think the monitoring, if required by the township, the applicant shall provide pre-construction baseline measurements and post-construction, if required, shall be.
Yeah, yeah.
Required.
Okay, so that must have been the one that you were.
The one thing we breezed over was lighting, and the reason we breezed over that is our lighting zoning ordinance is pretty robust.
Well, this proposed ordinance here does get a bit more detailed, but we do have an existing performance standards section in the zoning ordinance that addresses glare and indirect glare, which we've used several times now to fix situations in our township. That's worked pretty well. And then when we go through these land development plans, we require adjustable shields because once they set them up, it's hard to tell. I mean, sure, you can see the plan and you can see the foot candles on the lighting page of that plan, but in the field, things are different when you go to build, the structure. And then that's when we really figure out which lighting is an issue. And as long as they have those adjustable shields per their spec in their plan, the recorded plan, we go back and we say, okay, you need to fix this. DHL was one that didn't do what we asked from the gate. We made them go back and make all their lights adjustable, and they couldn't get adjustable shields, so they had to get specifically made shields for these lights, and we even forced them to turn off a couple of the lights so that it wasn't affecting the neighboring adjacent properties. You're always going to be able to see something in the distance, but I like to say that when you look at our buildings from the distance, they're not quite as bad as when you look at them from other municipalities. They're significantly brighter, and that's because we've implemented adjustable shielding. Yeah. I know that was a long-winded, but we have a lot of experience with that. Yep.
I see a good example of the Conowanga Township up along Locust Point Road. It looks like there's a lane strip up there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So our lights are, as Krista said.
Yep.
Are we covered good with blasting?
We gotta follow the state rules.
Yeah, and now the only thing our ordinance says is that they're required to give us their reporting, but it doesn't go anything beyond that. They are already regulated by the state, so they have to give us notice at least 48 hours, business hours, before they go to blast. But that's because we go and notify like our emergency services and our police department, and we try to put that kind of thing up on the website in advance so that people are aware that blasting is about to occur. But that's as far as our existing ordinance goes. Yeah. And then, of course, if anyone ever has any issues, we always refer to the paperwork that we've gotten from the state to pass along, because there's contact information for that, because they go and inspect, and if you got a crack in your house or whatever, they'll come and check that out. So that's not perfect. I don't know how they go about their ways, but that is a different agency.
Just one more question on the decommissioning side. I don't know how this works, but I'm assuming that the data center use is a lot more valuable than agricultural use. So as kind of an incentive to get them to clean it up properly, we would not allow them to ask to have the use changed back to pure agricultural or have a reassessment change before it's totally cleaned up. Is that correct?
I don't know how it would work.
Is your question, I mean, from a zoning perspective, they could do what they wanted with it. That's not something that they would, like, if it's a use by right, like agricultural, if they wanted to bulldoze it and turn it into farmland, that's not something the township would have any control over.
So I guess I'm thinking in the standpoint of, let's say I have a house built on a lot and it's assessed at a certain value. I tear the house down and I go back to, is it the county, and say I want to have it reassessed for now just being a lot?
So they're required to put in a demo permit, and what we do is, once that permit is issued, we do a report every month to county. We're required to, and then county, they're very, very behind. I've heard people getting county coming onto their property a whole year after they pulled that permit, you know? And so it's not very predictable of when it'll get reassessed. And if it's demoed before reassessment and they want to challenge or appeal to York County, they can, for the time that there was no structure on that lot. But I think what you're getting at is that could probably be detrimental to us, getting a lot of tax monies, real estate tax monies from that, and then all of a sudden it's gone. But what I guess I can say to that is we'd have to start preparing. It wouldn't be very quick that all of that would get demolished. It would be a process.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, can we use that also to kind of as an incentive for them to make sure it's cleaned up properly? Once it's cleaned up, we can't really stop them from asking for a reassessment, but do we have control of or be able to say, no, it's not totally done yet, we're not gonna let you get it reassessed?
No, I don't, I don't believe so, no.
Vacant industrial building on top of this house.
Yeah, but if they're decommissioning it and demoing it.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
that's what happened.
Right.
What he's talking about, if it just goes vacant, there's no.
Well, it looks like the demo or decommission ordinance is required after so long of being vacant, they have to get rid
Yeah,
of it.
they have to.
Yeah. I think so. If it's vacant, even if it's vacant, I don't think it, you know, I might have to defer to you, Kate. Kate used to work for the county tax assessor office. Do you know how that would work, Kate? So if we have a data center, you know, here in the township, and they want to decommit, or what, they go vacant. They go vacant. would they get reassessed just being vacant?
Yeah, because the new permit will definitely, you know what I mean, like, they're gonna come out just like if you're building something and reassess it.
But now that we're talking this out, but see, we wouldn't know right away if they were vacant. And like, for instance, if one of these industrial buildings, so let's take out the demolition right now. Like we're gonna say it's still standing, it's just vacant. I don't think it would get reassessed while it's vacant, because right now, when we have an industrial building that's vacant, that reassessment doesn't happen, correct? Because we don't get notified of it, so how would county know about it?
Not unless they call them to them and ask for it.
Okay, so if they would call in, it sounds like, hey, we're vacant, can you do a reassessment? Maybe that would be a part of the appeal of them being vacant. Okay.
Yeah, but a vacant property, just like a vacant house, doesn't diminish in assessed value.
Right, I'm not concerned about whether they can, maybe I misspoke, I'm saying.
You're worried about the
If they're gonna
decommission.
decommission it and tear it down.
Is it another thing that we can hold over them
Right.
in order to hold
Right.
up? And as the
You're
attorney
not gonna
said,
have reduced tax rate because you didn't finish cleaning it up.
it's unlikely that we can do that.
No, that's why we would have the financial security. Right, that's what we would be holding over them.
And again, that
Yeah.
financial security, the way it's laid out, it's reassessed every 5 years. It's 110% of whatever the engineers come up with the cost to do that. And the operator would supply it, and then it would get vetted through our process, correct?
Correct. Yeah, so it would be the financial security. Sorry, I didn't understand what you were getting at.
You know, that's another thing I never really thought about until we had so much time in the ordinance spent on decommissioning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that's there, and council will tell us that's there because they've looked at other places, and that, I can't imagine the data center building faster than anything, that any of them are vacant. But if you get a vacancy, they didn't tear it down, you're down there in a land use where it's not usable for anything, you can't repurpose it.
Mm-hmm.
It can't turn into like a Spooky Nook sports complex, or, well, then you're gonna have this huge, potentially 300,000 square foot vacant building. And if it's not torn down right away, what are the township's considerations for health and safety? It becomes an attractive nuisance.
Mm-hmm.
You have kids down there drinking or getting into trouble down there. You can't use the building for anything else. You'd want it taken down as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's just gonna be, it's an invitation. If I was 16, it'd be an invitation.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I didn't even think about that until we started talking about it, because I don't think of data centers, as popular as they are, going belly up and not.
I mean, it's the only permitted use.
Correct.
that-
Besides
that-
agricultural, you
Right.
said.
For that
yeah.
kind of building.
Right.
So if they don't tear it down, there's no negotiating for turning it into something that the community might need.
Well, I
Then
mean,
what's gonna happen to it if they spend a year before they decommission it?
isn't this right? They would probably, if someone was interested in that building before they decommissioned, I don't think anything would stop them from applying for a variance.
Or they could apply to rezone. I mean,
Yeah.
If it's run its use and someone did want to put a spooky nuke there and, you know, you needed to find a zone where that worked, I mean, they could apply for that. They could apply for a use variance in theory.
But
Those
those,
are pretty rare and hard to get.
But
I mean,
there's a
township would have-
possibility it could be, before you go worst case scenario, you're already gonna have it set up for something that, you know, maybe noisier and bigger and people don't want anyway. But
Yeah, I
you
mean,
could repurpose it, you know, if it would take the applicant a little longer to jump through some hoops.
well, and it would be public hearings, so the public would have say in that if that did occur, but yeah, I mean, anything's possible, that could happen.
Just food for thought.
Yeah.
An empty building with no other use that takes a while to tear down is just,
I-
I didn't even think about it.
If it was something that was problematic through time and, you know, then someone suddenly comes in and says, I want to repurpose this, and we're like, well, you have all these issues, you know, that we've experienced over the years, there's no way, we want it decommissioned, the municipality could certainly exercise that, I'm sure. Correct?
sorry.
I think- Yeah, never mind, it's okay. I think what I said was right.
Yeah, that's what we know we ought to do.
Anything else, gentlemen?
if they're not.
Okay.
So to wrap up this portion, on the agenda is York Baker Farm's comments to the township. There's a representative here. If you have any comments, and I'd appreciate if they were brief.
Yes, my name is John Nadiak, I'm with BPC. I'll keep the comments brief. Generally, we had put together a few comments, several pages worth. I think they're gonna focus, there's some technical aspects we can discuss with your solicitor. There's also some global kind of major issues, whether it's used by special exception or used by right. We're suggesting it should be used by right simply because of the complexity of the ordinance. I mean, it is 20-some pages, and there are cross-references. There are some things that are approved, you approved at land development, some things that you approved at building code issuance, and then something that should be a building code or land development don't say that. And apparently they have to be proven at a zoning hearing board as a special exception. That is a burden that is too great, I think, for any developer to comply with and to try and navigate this complexity, this morass of different regulations that are putting on, whether it's the prior noise ordinance, the new noise provisions in this ordinance, the lighting that may be different from ordinance to ordinance. I have to admit, I didn't read them all. But to the extent you have different standards and different ordinances, that's a problem. Beyond that, I really don't have anything else to offer. I mean, that's just kind of a general summary of all the comments. I do think, in my opinion, some of the requirements are going beyond the bounds of zoning. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
He was the attorney for York Baker's farm. Yep. John Madiak. Madiak, yeah.
Okay, I ask one more time, anything else up here? Okay, I'm gonna move on to public comments. Now, public comments,
Well, and real quick, before we, if I may.
Yeah.
I was just gonna summarize where we go from here is all. So what's gonna happen is our attorney is going to make the recommended changes. He obviously has some work to do based off of tonight's discussions. But what'll happen, I believe, is he'll end up submitting these to York County Planning Commission and our Planning Commission, unless you have a change.
It'll come back before the board, and then it'll go, once you guys see it again, then it'll go.
Correct. So really, it's just a mere motion after the board sees it at a meeting, probably a regular meeting, to forward it on to the next part of the process, which is York County Planning Commission and our Planning Commission. And then after we get comments back, the board will then address it again. They'll have to authorize a public hearing. And then that's when we'll figure out, what venue, what time, what day, all that stuff, advertise it, put it on the website. I keep updating the data center section on our homepage. And whenever there's another data center meeting, when we're, explicitly talking about data centers, I put it on the red banner at the top. But did I say that sufficiently? That, does anyone have anything else to add in regards to the process?
well, I want to make it clear, the process, during this process, particular process, has nothing to do with developers agreement or what did a community betterment agreement. That all is negotiated going down the line. That takes into consideration recreation needs, fire trucks, possible contribution, offset taxes. All that is negotiated during the land development. And we have to be careful what we ask for because we don't want to violate the law. You can't ask for all site improvements. That's against the law. So, but we stretch the limit as far as we can. So, you were going to say something. Did I say something wrong? Okay.
No, we have to be, there are parameters to to what that is. And you can't say, well, we could really use a new school. I mean, it has to be tied to the use essentially.
And then just to add, Chairman said it at the beginning of the meeting, is that we're within a curative amendment process right now with the deadline in April. So to get York County Planning Commission comments through could take a month or longer, depending on, when they allow us on their agenda. So that's why it's pertinent for us to get these comments done or get this ordinance draft ready to send out. And that's what we were trying to accomplish tonight. And this wasn't our first time looking at this document. This is the same, more detailed document that we saw last year. Took a lot of your comments from the fire hall, from the emails, and all of that. And I believe I also said this at the beginning of the meeting, but we incorporated that. Our Attorney Miller continued to add things to our ordinance within reason, within the limits of the law. And there were people who were sending us, studies or articles from other, areas, and he looked at all of those, and Attorney Wimard here also. So we really tried to beef this up. If you see something that's not in here, it's probably because it's in another area of that codified ordinance. We do have a very good subdivision and land development ordinance, which you've heard us say, SAUDO, that's what that is. We have a lot of ordinances in the zoning ordinance. We have standalone ordinances. We have stormwater management. We have so much because we've been dealing with industrial development for a while now. So this isn't our first rodeo. It's just this is on a much larger scale. So this will be intense if one gets submitted, and it will be a long process. So that's all I have.
Sure?
I think so.
Okay, we're going to open the floor up to citizens' comments. I'm asking that township residents can come up to the podium and state your name and address so that she gets everyone's comments. We're gonna limit you to 3 minutes. So whoever wants to come up to the podium, how about?
Christie, could I have that map back up on any sheet?
Sure. Let me just bring this over. I guess I'll just have to let you know, Scott, when you're down, okay?
I'm gonna be very brief.
Is this the map? Is this what you wanted?
That's what I want.
Okay.
So if you notice the lower.
Name and address, please.
Yep.
Name and address.
Scott Prowl, 685 Locust Street, Mount Woodview. The area to the south of the lane that goes back to the Bitzer residence, that is part of the overlay, is divided almost squarely by streams and by major power transmission lines and the easy gas lines, basically making that portion of the parcel unusable. It sets on a slope like that. Truthfully, should this overlay not be pulled back to the north of the lane to the Bitzers to offer further protection to the residents of Saginaw.
Okay, thank you.
And I see the rest of my time where
You're gonna have to address that, probably.
Mike Schrieffer, 05 Laurel Drive.
Mike, I am so sorry. I apologize. Don't worry, I'm not counting you, and I have it. Don't worry, you're good.
So what do we have to address?
Mr. Perrow had just talked about seating time, and I think per Robert's
No,
rules.
we're not, we cannot cede time.
But, so Robert's
Yeah.
Rules of Order doesn't allow that.
I'm
And
sorry, I missed that.
it's in order to give fairness to everyone who wants to talk when you cede time. And I don't know if our attorney wanted to go into any more of that, but.
Yeah, Robert's Rules of Order, which governs these things, absent the township adopting a policy otherwise, does not allow for the seating of time.
So I'll start you now, but I'll also add a minute to the okay, I got you.
This thing work?
Yep.
205 Laurel Drive. Thank you for your time, everybody. Board of Supervisors, Planning Committee. I just wanted to I got to speak with Daryl this week. We had an excellent conversation, very open, and those comments reflected back to what the supervisors are doing. I think from the draft ordinance to the additions they have now, I think there's a little bit more tightening up that can be done. That's something that they can work on.
But for everybody to know, we spoke with outside independent counsel. He's worked with like 20 townships so far. Their draft document's better than everyone, which was kind of sad, but good for us. So they're doing the right things, we're moving in the right directions. We're past the feelings, we need to be the legal side. So if you have the legal people and you bring that up, we can't just get mad anymore. One thing that I did want to add, I didn't hear anything about fines for violations, which would be good to offset costs.
They're in the zoning ordinance.
Okay,
Yep.
gotcha.
Yep.
I don't like hearing non-committal words in something that's supposed to be a policy, like might, may, likely, so on and so forth. I heard Mike address that. And I do want to address, I never met Mike McCallum tonight before. Mike hit it spot on. Nail these companies for everything you can get out of them. They have way more money than everybody in this township. So if we can make it as painful as possible, which you're continuing to do within the legal precedents, that is perfect. Last, I will say, Chief, thank you so much for the January 5th comments you made. You're spot on. Our resources for fire are so spread thin, and any more big buildings is gonna take away from us. So if we have a fire, but the data center does, who's more important? You guys are. And the last thing I'll say, and I wanted to end on a positive note, this isn't bad, but I don't think during a workshop or ordinance discussion, any tax benefits should be discussed. That should be a different conversation. This is about ordinance and law, not money. Nothing about this data center should be about money. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
I'm gonna just move this here. Yep, thank you.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Deidre, from Utica.
Thank you. Oh, here, I'll stop your time, sorry. You have to talk into the top of it.
Which one is it?
She's my one.
Deidre from Utica.
Oh.
1060 Second Street in Mount Wolf. I know the township's working on no negative impact to residents. One of the questions that I kind of have is how do you handle with the decreased property values? What makes a data center look okay for somebody to buy a property down there if one day one of the residents wants to sell? I don't know how they do that. Maybe they could create an escrow for that difference. The other question I had was with the sewer authority. You said that the sewage, they were gonna tap into the sewage down there. I don't know how that works, and I don't know if that's separate from what the township does. But I do know when we get heavy rains down there, we sit at the lowest part of Saginaw. We've had sewage back up into our house because a tree fell on the pumping station. Heavy rains down there caused the sewage to come up through the manhole cover down there, and it comes up into the river. So I don't know how that ties in or how that interrelates with you guys. But that's something that you might want to look at also. Stormwater, I know you talked about it a little bit, but Saginaw also has not had any of their drain issues down there fixed since the storm of Agnes in the 70s. We have open ditches down there that heavy rains cause flooding. I've been flooded. I had major flooding with Tropical Storm Lee because of the way the storm system set up down there. We also, the thing of the town sits at the lower level. When you build, you're gonna build up, so you're gonna raise us lower. So I don't know how that gets handled, if that's anything that the township deals with or not, but those are pretty much my concerns. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Daniel Wunsch,
There we go.
670 Locust Street. My concerns are, as I looked at other situations here around Pennsylvania, one of the things that I noticed most significantly that was coming up was the 1778 Rich Pike LLC development in Clifton Township in Lackawanna. You're talking about all these good ideas about height and all these kinds of things, and they had these exact same restrictions that you're all talking about, and they went into litigation, and within 8 months, they're now settling, the settlement now, they had the 35-foot height limitation. They ended up settling at a 65-foot height limitation with 15 feet of roof equipment allowed, a water tower at 85 feet, 100 feet from the property line setbacks, 400 feet from existing homes, and then 65 decibel sound, which is the sound of an interior of a car driving at 60 miles an hour, which means that as I'm sitting in my house in Saginaw, I'm going to hear 24 hours a day what somebody driving down the highway is going to hear for that short trip. I have to sit there 24 hours a day for the rest of my life listening to essentially a car engine running. That is not something that is appropriate. This is a project that is not in the right spot. You can have all the different requirements that you want, and you have all the.
We cannot debate the spot. That's already been decided on.
I'm sorry, you're taking my time,
Oh.
sir. Can you pause my time?
Yeah, we'll give you some time back. As for the noise, we have our noise, we talked about our noise, so.
I realize you've talked about the noise, but the fact of the matter is these are developers that are coming in and saying the noise requirements that are on the books are too restrictive. We need something louder. And they're coming back and they're coming at 65 decibels. And I'm telling you what 65 decibels is. Anybody can look up on their phone right now what 65 decibels are. That is not an acceptable volume rate that we can afford to live in a community in this area. That's outrageous. And we're talking about, and they're also talking about how they should have these larger plants, how they should be closer to our property lines. All of this stuff, these things can be addressed by moving this location. And I realize you're going to tell me that it's too late for that, but I'm telling you, that's the only way that these problems can be solved is by putting this somewhere else. This is the second largest agricultural location in the township. The only other one is right across the street from, what's the development down there? Sherman Oaks, that's the only other one. So we're taking up the second largest agricultural location, which is, and if you look at the definition of our agricultural location, it is, this project does not in any way meet the definition of what should be in an agricultural location.
Okay, thank you.
Diane Wolf, 303 Gravel Hill Road. Obviously, this is near and dear to me. I will say, quite frankly, can't eat it more. But a few thoughts that came up. Our adjacent property, adjacent to the property that we're talking about, I will be reaching out to our conservation group that is in. I may be able to give you some helpful information. It's a Philadelphia conservation group. And they may have some insight input into those kinds of things. As I said, these are random thoughts that came up. You're talking about lanes and highways and roads. Take the Bitzers into consideration. They're going to deal with dust of traffic. Make them paint their road. You're talking about different things. For protecting the citizens, to protect their rights. Water is a problem, and we have, I think, you're acknowledging that. I think Chairman Naylor talked about that. I will tell you, we live on a farm, we live on wells. If Tupper moves the cattle to a certain field, and those cows decide to drink when I'm taking a shower, the cows win. We're talking cows in the well. We're not talking a data center. It's a problem. It's a problem. I was greatly concerned about the conversation regarding subdivision. What prevents them if I don't understand the parameters of, they have one data center and now they want to subdivide. Now we get two on the same property. Then we get three. What stops that? And then lastly, are we not setting a precedent? What happens with our friends the grocers decide that they want to do an overlay? They're setting a precedent and then it's overlay. The Wolves want to do an overlay.
you know, it goes on and on and on. You're setting a precedent, and how can you tell one yes and one no? So they mentioned there's a West Virginia, wherever, there's a data center. Maybe you're setting us up to have East Manchester Township be the data center of the Northeast.
Thank you.
Evening. I'm Alex Snyder. To be clear, I'm not a resident, but own property, 1025 Jerusalem School Road, 3821 North Sherman Street Extended, 180 Jerusalem School Road. We are the largest farm contiguous tract. I farm with my dad and my son. I heard Mr. Naylor, who I respect a great deal, say that the siting can't be debated anymore, but I would challenge this group. I see a lot of really hard work here, a lot of really, really good ideas in trying to tighten this ordinance up. It seems like a really good ordinance, but for one thing, which is why the hell is this in the ag district? This is an industrial use. This should be in the industrial district. Put your overlay there. Great ordinance. Great job. I know that's been debated, but read the purposes of your ag district. Preserve the area for prime agriculture. Limit the use of land to uses related to ag. Prevent the intrusion of development. That's right there in your ordinance. Read your ordinance. It doesn't belong there. Put it in the industrial area. I hope you guys will reconsider that, because I think this is poor planning. I think the County Planning Commission is going to say so, and it pisses me off.
Thank you for your comment.
Angela Lloyd, 670 Locust Street in Saginaw. I don't know how I follow that act, but as I was researching, especially in Virginia, the big data centers that have gone into Virginia, and they just keep spreading, some of the environmental concerns that as an agricultural zone in a rural area, we need to be concerned about. The lights and the noise, the effects on the animals around, considering bats. That's going to impact bats, that's going to impact our mosquito population. York County last year was spraying for mosquitoes because it was so bad and West Nile was spreading. So we're going to add to that problem. Consider the effect on pollinators, on bees. We've got Forge Hill orchards just down the road, and you've got farms that are still farming. How is that going to impact those populations? And going back to that 1778 Ridge Pike that was spoken about earlier, a lot of the stuff that you guys are talking about tonight, they've shot down, and they've raised those expectations beyond what you're trying to control. But one thing that they did put into place was they were able to negotiate that any sewage and waste that they're producing must be disposed outside of the township, so that we're not taking that responsibility on. So that might be something to add into your ordinance as a protection for our area. Other research that I've done, I know you talked about having them do the best, most recent technology to make sure that they are being environmentally conscious and they're running efficiently. Immersion cooling is something that's new that doesn't take as much water, so that might be something to look into as maybe something that they need to do, that we are requiring that they do that. It's more costly, so most of these places are not interested in doing that. So I don't know if that's something that can be added in if you want to do your research on immersion cooling. And the increase to electric costs. Anybody that lives around these data centers, their water rates are going up, their electricity rates are going up. I mean, you're gonna put us all in the poorhouse. We're not a wealthy area to begin with. And the cost that's going to be sucked up by your residents, we need to have some tighter regulations there. And I also agree with the agriculture. I moved here, I don't know how many years ago, like 20 some years ago. We moved to Saginaw because I loved how quiet it was. I love that I can go outside and I can see my stars at night. I'm not gonna be able to do that when I'm living on the hill right above a data center. I love that there's deer that are walking through my yard, and foxes and groundhogs and all of the critters everywhere. That is why we all live here. We don't want the traffic. We don't want all of this mess and the trucks coming in.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you, Angela.
Ryan McLean, 735 Market Street, Saginaw, 7347. She stated it exactly perfect. The gentleman before her stated everything perfect. I think the main thing I want to say is I'm a little too late coming onto this stuff too, and seeming to give a shit when it's now directly affecting us, when this should have been looked into to begin with. We knew these things were coming. We've seen the freaking warehouses for God knows how long, and now we're worried about it when it's in our backyard. So I mean, that's the main thing. This is getting me now. Like the gentleman said, for her, definitely look into these again with the agriculture. That's the biggest thing that was always confusing the hell out of me. That was agricultural area. How the hell is a data center all of a sudden now coming into this, and now we're looking into all of it. Beyond that, and she said with the wildlife, I mean, that's something we gotta consider too. I mean, screw the water and utilities shit coming in and the fire department stuff. Now we gotta worry about, there's less property now for these deer that are already being run out of everywhere. I've seen a massive increase since the quarry over here, the Doris Quarry was closed. I worked for Kinsley Construction. I've seen what happens when those things get shut down into warehouses, and now the wildlife's coming further in. Now we're just gonna be shoving them further and further in. So what are we gonna do with that to mitigate it? I mean, I still give a crap about the animals. We're gonna have all that increase. The more wildlife is coming right into our backyards. They shouldn't be hanging out in our backyards. So there's more to this than just ordinances to make it so that, oh shit, I can see my stars at night and the noise and stuff sucks. We need to be more proactive to make sure this does not happen anymore. We're gonna lose more and more of this. If they're already taking that farmland, the gentleman before her, they're gonna be taking all of that. And we're just gonna keep moving further and further down, further and further north. All this stuff's gonna be gone. I just wanna see more pro-action on this. And I'm not saying that it's all your fault, and it's my fault too. I waited too freaking long to actually make a voice on this stuff. So it's just something for all of us to consider, not just them. So we gotta start making a change on all of it. I appreciate the time, guys, and I do appreciate what you're doing now. We are trying to mitigate as much as we can at this time, but again, we need to be more proactive. So I do appreciate what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Nothing against that, we're doing what we can at this time, so let's just figure that out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Campbell, 1480 Conowalgo Creek Road.
Are you in Conowalgo Township?
Yes, I am on Conowalgo Creek Road in Manchester Township, East Manchester Township, I should say. My property borders East Manchester and Conowalgo. So I'm dealing with not only
Okay,
this ordinance.
okay, let's keep it
but
to East
Conowalgo.
Manchester's
I am,
ordinance.
I'm getting there.
Yep.
I'm getting there. So I have two agricultural fields to have to deal with. For one, the water situation that you all were talking about, there are ways to do it. I was in the construction business for 20 years. I used to work and haul out of the incinerator. They have cooling fans and everything else there. There are ways to make these guys, and they've done it out in Nevada. You bring in silos. They have to silo their water. They have to silo their sewage. And it gets filtered out on their site. You don't have to have them take out of our creeks and replenish our creeks, our wells, or any of that. You guys are just afraid to put it in your ordinances because you're afraid of getting smacked. But you honestly, and all honestly, you won't get smacked as long as you make your lawyers word it the right way. On another sense, the wildlife, you think you got deer problems now getting out on the road? I'm a hunter. You put these in, and these power lines start striking and making all these noises and vibrations, you're gonna have deer out in the roads even more. Our insurance is gonna go up because our cars are gonna be getting into more and more accidents. You guys have got, I don't understand why we can't force these places to be in an industrial building because, my God, there's a lot of them empty. Put them in them.
How many we have?
All them buildings, yes, there are.
There are not.
How many, you want me to go?
Not in
down the
East
line?
Manchester Township. There is
Oh,
not very
okay.
many vacant.
Okay.
Right now, it's just the one.
We have the data.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just the.
Tomorrow, while I'm going out and I'm following tractor and trailers, I'll go around and I'll start tagging all the empty
Okay.
that are in East Manchester. And I'll send them to you. Cause I mean, I've done, like you said, I've called to you guys too. Different times. There's ways you just guys are afraid to even touch it.
Mhm.
I think you should really honestly reconsider, because we're gonna take the brunt of it. And when
Thank
it
you.
comes down the line.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more
Next.
thing.
Nope,
Shut
your time's up.
What
Thank you.
happens when people move and you ain't got people to pay your township? Cause that's what's gonna happen.
Thank you for your comment.
Okay, next.
Hi, my name is Tracy Lau. I live at 355 Riviera Street. And I don't know if this is something that can be looked into for adding to one of your ordinances. But when it comes to sound and the generators, there's something called a sound attenuated generator. And I don't know if this is something you guys have already discussed. But they're generators that are designed with built-in enclosures to help reduce operating noise, and data centers is something that, there's been such generators have been using it as well. Just wanted to pass that on to be looked into.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve Trot, 4951 North Sherman Street. It was touched on, and maybe before I got here tonight, but my greatest concern is litigation. And the point two,
Litigation.
you have protected ag land here, a little bit. And with what's already happened in the township in the last 10, 15 years, most of the residents are sad to see it go, and it keeps going. But what happens when these billion-dollar corporations sue the township? Because you've created such a tight ordinance that we can all sit here and agree that we did the work, and it's great. But what happens when you get sued? And what happens if you lose? So, that billion-dollar corporation probably doesn't mind small money for that. But for you guys and your residents, it's a fortune. And you could lose, because it's already happening everywhere in the country. So for what it's worth, you gotta consider protecting the ag land you have, and the only way to do that is by not allowing it.
Is there any other residents?
Any non-residents?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Maybe if anyone has any comments after these. Oh.
And this is right across the street from me. I would love to know
Yep.
who did the overlay? Who approved an overlay over agricultural land? Who?
That was in the December 16th board.
did.
It was in this
Right.
board meeting,
Why
correct?
would you do that? Why would you do that? You talk about the residents and how you care about the residents, but yet you do something like that to us.
I really,
An overlay, that is agricultural land. These data centers
Okay.
belong in industrial areas. They consume everything, too much, from everybody. And they're billionaires, and they will fight you, and they will win. I'm from north, where they're fracking the heck out of that poor land up there. And I saw it with my own eyes. I lived there, and they get their way, no matter what. Why would you put an overlay on agricultural land when there's residents so close? This needs to be in an industrial area, and that's all I have to say. Thank you. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, where are we at now?
Oh, just closing, I guess.
I guess just closing, so, Tom, you're gonna have to wrap this up for us, that, we're going to roll this up in a ball. We are gonna consider, extending, the overlay to the Bitzers and the Lows. That's all in the consideration. And that comes to, the Board of Supervisors February meeting, right?
Yep, we'll take into account your comments, comments from the public, you know, the things that are practical and legally permissible, and then that will come to the township with a revised ordinance, and then, in theory, hopefully from there, send it on to planning commissions and get it back. You guys would, I mean, Christie laid it out earlier, but anyway, those are the immediate steps without rehashing everything she said.
Okay, I'm gonna ask for comments, and I'll go through the planning commission first.
Can I
And
ask a quick question? On the streaming, people have been leaving comments. Are you reading those? And are people able to still reach out to the township if they couldn't come tonight?
There shouldn't be any comments on the streaming.
Yeah, we addressed that at the beginning of the meeting, that they can contact the township office with questions or concerns. We realized we couldn't get everybody in here. We went the last couple meetings that we had about this, we had 8 or 10 people show up. So we did a reasonable opinion that we could house it here. The next meeting, when we have a hearing, we will consider housing it somewhere where it's more compatible and more room.
Not quite sure why you decided you weren't gonna get lots of people like you did when you were planning.
Because the last time we voted on the overlay, there was 10 people here. That's why.
Nobody knew what was happening. Nobody
No,
knew what
It was posted on the
wait a minute.
website.
We are so ultra transparent, we put everything on our website, that when we have a meeting, it's advertised. We expect you to make the effort to go and find out when the meeting is.
Or you schedule it the same freaking day that Tom.
Calm down, you're out of order. You're out of order.
No, so are you. Yeah, so are you.
Okay. Okay,
No.
so that's what we're planning on doing. We would like to accommodate everybody in here, but this is what we got, so.
We also asked on there if you're going to provide a transcript, because anybody watching the streaming could not hear anything that any of you were saying because of the mic situation.
What?
So if that is impossible to post or post notes,
Yeah, we will approve the minutes, and then they'll be posted on the website.
just feel like everybody that's trying to participate should have the right to know what happens, know what's being said, and also offer their input if they were not able to come tonight or there wasn't room, we were almost maxed out.
Well, I'm sorry that if somebody has to work night work and they can't make it to the meeting,
We were like one short from being maxed out.
okay, we hear you.
Even if people had come, they wouldn't have been let in.
Okay. Apologize about that. Okay, comments from anyone down through? Go ahead, Dean.
I'll give my 2 cents. First and foremost, thank you all for coming out. Understand the frustration. As it was said before, previous 2 meetings had low attendance, more than enough. We do our best to put stuff out on the website in time. And as somebody that used to sit out there, that's what led me here, reading stuff. And so again, appreciate your attendance. It is a process that we go through. We, as you heard, try to do our best to protect the residents and push the limits to where we can defend ourselves if we have, someone mentioned getting a lawsuit from somebody. Is it going to be perfect? Probably not. But we have a deadline before us, and that's what we need to march for. We went through the selection of the land at previous meetings, and apologize if the videos aren't great. It's new technology we're trying to get out there so everyone can hear. Prior to this stuff coming here, you had to show up. This is where participation happens. sure it's the same place. You know, if you go up to state capitol, sometimes you probably need to show up there or contact your representatives. You've got access to forms and stuff, and our staff sees that we get it, and we do our best to read it and take action on it. So overall, I just appreciate y'all being here and the feedback. Thank you.
Daryl?
Okay, I appreciate everyone being here, comments, I read all the emails that people send in, I do
Not in my
research,
backyard.
I go out and visit sites. For some people that may have not been here earlier, previous meetings, we had to rule out industrial areas due to the fact they're all spoken for. So the last, one that's being planned right now, those plans will be coming forth shortly. We just approved Commerce Center, the latest meeting.
Trade Center 83
Yeah, Trade
East.
Center, 83. So we're kind of maxed out there with that, and we can't go anywhere with it. We looked at, Bigger Farm, they presented the request, and looking at theirs, I know been looking up here since 1977, last 15 years or so, there's not been any crop planting on it. It's starting to be overgrown, trees and everything else. It is a little bit of a nature area. I think, for me, that seemed like a logical place. We had another person here, Chestnut Valley, we had to rule that out because there's no access to it. And you can't sell property without access to it. There's a lot of people using AI and smartphones, smart cars, and everything else that's driving all this. We have a governor sitting up there in Harrisburg that wants this. He wants Pennsylvania to be a leader in it. Pennsylvania is a good site because we have cooler weather that helps cool these data centers down in the wintertime. We have good job markets. We have construction, all like that. The push, I forget what the amount of money was that the governor threw out there, so he's pushing for all these, no matter where. I researched Virginia, and they've had data centers for over 30, 40 years. People live next to them, no issues. I have a personal friend of mine who lives in Iowa, and he drives by a data center every day and sent me pictures of it. And I said, and it's right next to their highway. I said, when you drive by, put the window down, tell me you're hearing anything. He hasn't heard anything. And it's got big cooling equipment on it. So technology's changing for the better. So these areas for the buildings. That's all I have.
Just one other comment about the industrial district that was discussed extensively last time we did this workshop. If it's in the industrial district, there are not, one fact, there's not high voltage lines, which would be necessary for any data center. So to put those in, which are not, they're utility, they're not subject to zoning. The state would just be putting those in and probably somewhat potentially taking your land to do that. So that was one of the reasons too that the industrial district just did not work.
And they're the one.
Sorry?
Virginia does not have all these power lines. They're not using them. They're putting them next to neighborhoods and communities, and they don't have them. They don't have the power lines.
I think that is, well, I'm not going to get back and forth, but that's, with the data centers, they do require extensive power.
Oh, I know. The plan is too.
Okay, mine comments before, and I want to thank everybody for coming. Most of your concerns, and I get it, we all get it up here. We don't want it in our backyard. No, none of us want a warehouse, none of us want a truck parking, none of it just want it in our backyard. But I thought we were up here demonstrating the fact that we do care, and we are trying to make this as within the laws of Pennsylvania, restrictive enough so it comes in, it's going to be quiet, won't harm the environment, and less impact on you as possible. So I'm kind of disappointed because we're up here knocking our heads against this table, going through everything, and everybody that comes up to that is just, you know, it's frustrating. It's just frustrating. We are trying our best. That's all I can say. That's all I have to say. And yeah, so with that, I think we have to have an executive session to talk about litigation. So I'm going to, I have to keep forgetting to adjourn.
I think we should recess.
Yeah, recess to executive session to talk about litigation issues. So thank you again for everyone coming.
When should we expect the draft to be posted? A couple weeks?
No, it has to, the minutes of this meeting have to be approved.
No, the draft.
The draft?
The draft. It'll be advertised. So once all of this gets cleaned up from the comments tonight and everything, and after the board authorizes advertisement, that's when it'll get reposted onto the website. And then, yep. So that's when, I don't know the timeline. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So do we need the planning commission to come back?
Hold
on
on
this,
real
or-
quick. Let me just.